Recently, I was asked a question by a viewer that really got me thinking. Of inactive players, who is the greatest basketball player who is not in the Hall of Fame? That's really tough to say definitively, and there's many great candidates for this title. But there's one player whose name I just couldn't get out of my head. For me, if there's one guy who should get in, but currently isn't, it's Tom Chambers. There's a lot of players in the Hall of Fame who are not as talented as this guy. If he played in today's NBA, then a lot of people on social media would be referring to him as a unicorn. This 6'10" power forward played the game like a slashing wing, and he was ridiculously explosive to say the least. He began his career with the San Diego Clippers, and then with the Seattle Supersonics. Over his first 7 seasons with those squads, he averaged roughly 20 points and 7 rebounds on 48% shooting. He could have scored even more during that stretch, but he was sharing the scoring load with talented offensive weapons like Dale Ellis and Xavier McDaniel. But once he was acquired by the Phoenix Suns, he would thrive in his opportunity to be the #1 scoring option. With the team, he averaged as high as 27 points per game in 1990. He was a 4-time All-Star, was a top 10 MVP finalist twice, and eventually, he became a 6th Man of the Year candidate with the Phoenix Suns in 1993. His highlights were jaw-dropping, including one of the most iconic dunks in NBA history, when he absolutely destroyed Mark Jackson with his 2-handed slam. He also has the 3rd highest scoring performance in Phoenix Suns history, when he dropped 60 points in a revenge game against his former team, the Seattle Supersonics. Among inactive players, his 60 points is the most points ever scored in a single game by an NBA player who was not in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Over the course of his career, he scored a total of 20,049 points. Among inactive players, only 2 in NBA history have scored more career points than Tom Chambers, while not making it into the Hall of Fame. To put it simply, this guy was a major problem in his playing days, and is certainly one of the most underrated and underappreciated players in the history of the league. But beyond all of that, he's my choice as the greatest basketball player not in the Hall of Fame. I've been watching the game of basketball for many years at this point, and throughout that time, I've had a core belief that I've never really articulated to anyone. Basically, it's this. There's championship caliber players who never won a championship, and then there's NBA champions who were simply along for the ride. Unfortunately, legacies are defined mostly by the bottom line. Did you win or did you not? It's why Shaquille O'Neal can continue to roast Charles Barkley time and time again on live television, regardless of the fact that the round mound of rebound almost always took his game to another level in the NBA playoffs. If you ask me, when it comes to championship caliber players who never won a championship, one player in NBA history fits that description better than anyone else I've ever seen. You know him as the human highlight film Dominique Wilkins. What if I told you that Neek wasn't just a great dunker, and he wasn't just a great scorer, but he was without question one of the most complete offensive weapons in the history of the game. And when the postseason came around, somehow he always became even better, and was able to contend with dynastic juggernauts that you would assume his roster would have no business competing with. As Dominique himself has said on many different occasions, you don't score nearly 30,000 points in your career simply as a dunker. On the contrary, Neek was not only an above-the-rim athlete, but he was a mid-range artist, equipped with a soft shooting touch and with pristine footwork. He was a remarkable rebounder for a 6'8" wing, getting as high as 9 rebounds per game in 1991. These incredible attributes enabled Wilkins to complete many impressive feats, like leading the entire NBA in scoring during the 1985 to 1986 season, where he averaged 30.3 points per game, even ahead of elite scorers like Larry Bird, Alex English, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That season, he led his Hawks to 50 wins in a stacked Eastern Conference, and thanks to this stellar season-long performance, he finished second in the MVP voting, ahead of Magic Johnson and only behind Larry Bird. Dominique was also an athlete who developed his game over time, And as his career progressed, he didn't just become a solid three-point shooter, but he became legitimately one of the best three-point shooters in the entire league. By 1993, Wilkins was hitting a deadly 38% of his three-point shots, while ranking 7th in the league in three-pointers attempted per game. For goodness sake, he was 6th in the league in three-pointers made per game. During that season, on March 9th, 1993, Wilkins had his greatest performance from distance, as he scored 37 points while making 8 of his 12 three-point attempts. At the time, that was the Hawks franchise record for the most three-pointers made in a single game. And to this day, only 3 Hawks players have ever made more three-pointers in a game, regardless of the massive inflation in three-pointers attempted. Obviously, all of these aspects of his game are incredible, but the thing that always stood out to me the most is how Wilkins never shrunk under the weight of the moment. When the lights were the brightest, Nique performed at his best, as he always rose to the occasion. A perfect example of this comes from his epic battles with Michael Jordan and Larry Bird. Anytime these elite superstars squared off, you knew you were in for something special. Many of their matchups were simply some of the greatest one-on-one duels of all time, like on December 10th, 1986, when Wilkins outperformed Michael Jordan's 41 points by dropping 57 points of his own on 68% shooting, as he led his Hawks to a massive victory. Those 57 points are still the most points ever scored against Michael Jordan in a single game. Or how about when MJ scored 61 points on Dominique? But it was Nique who had 34 points and who hit the game-winning jumper right in MJ's face. For the record, Dominique dropped at least 35 points on Michael Jordan a total of 15 times throughout his career. Meanwhile, Jordan dropped at least 35 on Dominique a fewer 13 times. Throughout their careers, both guys averaged roughly 30 points per game against one another. To put it simply, on any given night, you never knew who was going to get the last laugh between Dominique and MJ. When it came to the individual matchup, the battles between Larry Bird and Dominique Wilkins were more of the same. In the totality of their careers against one another, Dominique averaged more points per game than Larry Bird, although it was usually Bird who got the victories, as his team was 40-17 against the human highlight film. With that being said, there was no question who had the better supporting cast, as Bird was supported by one of the best centers in the league in Robert Parrish, one of the best power forwards of all time in Kevin McHale, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league in Dennis Johnson, and a 6th Man of the Year winner in Bill Walton. I mean no disrespect to the Atlanta Hawks who played alongside of Nique, as he did have some quality role players behind him in Doc Rivers, and in one of the original symbols of longevity, Kevin Willis. With that being said, the overall supporting cast was simply nowhere close to the level of support that Magic Johnson had, that Isaiah Thomas had, and that Larry Bird had, which is mainly why those legends were able to accumulate multiple championships in the 1980s, while Dominique remained ringless. Even with all of this being the case, Wilkins' ability to excel in the postseason had some people believing that he could actually do the unthinkable and defeat the defending Eastern Conference champion Boston Celtics and make it to the NBA Finals. It was the 1988 Eastern Conference semifinals between the 57-win Boston Celtics and the 50-win Atlanta Hawks. 5 NBA Hall of Famers versus 1. What proceeded to happen was one of the most epic battles in playoff history, with an iconic finish for the ages. In a must-win 4th game, Dominique dropped an efficient 40 points to give his Hawks the victory. But his best performance of the series would come in its most crucial contest, the deciding 7th game. This contest is now fondly remembered in basketball lore as simply the duel. Larry Legend and the human highlight film were trading basket after basket throughout. It was an intense back-and-forth game, capped off with one of the most thrilling fourth quarters in playoff history. As expected, Dominique was his best when he had to be, and heading into Atlanta's final possession, he had torched the Celtics defense for 46 points. The Hawks were down and needed a 3-point basket to force overtime. After seeing Wilkins light them up all night long, the Celtics would not be taking any risks, and decided to foul Dominique intentionally before he could attempt a 3-point shot. He proceeded to make the first free throw, and then missed the second one on purpose. But Atlanta was unable to secure the rebound, and the Celtics won the series as a result. On the night, Dominique scored 47 points on 19 of 33 shooting, in what was the most important basketball game of his professional career. Again, a team with just one Hall of Famer nearly took down a dynastic team that had 5, all because Dominique was the kind of superstar player who rose to the occasion. As I mentioned earlier in this video, there are NBA champions who were simply along for the ride. And then there's championship caliber players who never won a championship. The latter was Dominique. In an era of organic super teams like the Lakers, Celtics, Pistons, and 76ers, Dominique unfortunately never got to experience that level of a supporting cast, which I believe is the sole reason his career ended without multiple championship rings. But at the end of the day, if you ask me how I personally remember the legacy of Dominique Wilkins, it's that on any given night, regardless of who was out there on the court, Dominique could be the best player out there. It didn't matter if it was Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Julius Erving, or Michael Jordan. On any given night, Dominique could be the best of the very best.
That's not the end-all be-all. I always love a big 2. I don't really love a big 3. People talk big 3, but the big 3 thing has never really worked. And you say, well, what happened in Miami? That wasn't really a big 3. There was 3 guys that went in the lottery, and they did really well individually on their team, so they put up big numbers and had big accomplishments. But when you think about it, Bosh was the ultimate professional. He took a back seat, and he played a role in which, because he had such a high IQ and he was such a professional as an individual, his approach to everything is what made that work.
So as you can see, Clutch Sports is back at it again, as Rich Paul, the founder of the company and the lifelong friend of LeBron James, gave his thoughts on the Big 3 Miami Heat, claiming that they were never in fact a Big 3, but were instead just a Big 2. In this particular video, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I do not agree with Paul's statement, and frankly, I'm annoyed that he even suggested it. In order for an honest person to agree with his statement, they would have to be either one of 2 things. They would either be extremely young, so that they were not familiar with the Big 3 Heat during that era, or they would have to be a very casual basketball fan. I don't want to overstate or understate Bosh's talent and value when he was acquired by the Miami Heat. He was one of the best players in the league, but I certainly wouldn't say that he was top 5. This is actually how I would rank the top 20 players at the end of the 2009 to 2010 NBA season, and let me know in the comments section below how you would change up this order. So for me, Bosh was a borderline top 10 player. He was coming off a season in Toronto where they were 40 and 42, although the second best player on the team was Andrea Bargnani. So it's not like Bosh was necessarily swimming in supporting talent on the Raptors. That season, Bosh averaged 24 points, 10.8 rebounds, and 2.4 assists, while hitting 51.8% of his shots. He was 9th in the league in scoring, 6th in rebounding, 4th in player efficiency rating, and finished 12th in the MVP race, despite the fact that his team had a losing record. Now, contrary to popular belief, Bosh wasn't just a decent player who was putting up empty numbers on a bad team, but he was genuinely one of the most skilled big men in the entire league. His face-up game was dominant, as he was a quick 6'11" center/power forward. His jump shot was incredibly smooth and accurate as far as 20 feet out, and if you bit on his pump fake, he would punish you with his quick first step, as he blew by the defender and finished strong at the rim. One of his very specific areas of impact was as a low post scorer. In the 2009 to 2010 season, right before he joined the Miami Heat, he was literally the most efficient post scorer in the entire league, as he was hitting a tremendous 52.6% of his shots when posting up. This aspect is worth remembering, that Bosh was a traditional big man who was fundamentally sound and preferred to do much of his damage in the low post. So when Bosh officially joined the Miami Heat, he was only 26 years old, and it was the day before we knew where LeBron was heading in free agency. For that single day, many of us believed that the tandem of Wade and Bosh was enough to make Miami a legitimate title contender, and even Dwayne Wade talked about his excitement to play with Bosh.
But this opportunity that me and Chris have to, to team up and play together, it's just an unbelievable opportunity for me to be able to play with someone of his caliber. I got an opportunity to play with Shaq, and that was just, phenomenal. And I get to play with, Chris, right when he hit his prime. So right now I'm one of the luckiest mans, in the NBA and in the world.
Did you notice how Wade said that Bosh was in his prime? The revisionist history that you typically hear from biased guys like Rich Paul is that Bosh wasn't the same player in Miami. He was an athlete on the decline. Now don't get me wrong, his numbers did drop off from Toronto to Miami, but this was not because his game declined, but this was simply because of the fact that Bosh was no longer the number one option, and instead was relegated to a third option behind LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. This reduced role was something that Bosh fully expected and accepted upon joining the Miami Heat. In his very first press conference after joining Miami, he talked about his reduced role and how he was willing to sacrifice for the team.
Everything it's all about basketball. It's all about winning. I mean, if it was about the money and if it was about numbers, we'd all go back to our respective teams. It wasn't really about that. I mean, when you get wins, all the individual accolades come. I averaged my career best last year, and nothing happened. So, me personally, I can take it. I just think about it sometimes. I mean, just playing with these guys, yeah, sure, the numbers are going to go down, but like you say, the wins are going to go up, and all that other stuff, it just falls into place.
You see, this was a mature athlete who understand that playing as a team within a system can sometimes negatively impact your individual numbers, but Bosh willingly accepted that in order to win. It was an unselfish and commendable move from an ideal teammate. But now, years later, disingenuous people want to act like those numbers dropped simply because he wasn't that great of a player. He apparently isn't even worth including in a big three. As I mentioned earlier, Bosh ideally plays the game of basketball as a traditional post-up big man. But with LeBron James on his team, Bosh had to adapt and become more of an off-ball perimeter threat. Now, instead of waiting for the rock in the post, Bosh would often be in the corner waiting for an opportunity as a spot-up jump shooter. This is why his three-point attempts started steadily increasing after joining Miami, because he had to adjust his game in order to help his team win. And sure, this all resulted in his numbers dropping as he went from a 24-11 guy in Toronto to a 19-8 guy in Miami. But even with that being the case, his numbers were still relatively impressive, especially for that era. Let me ask you, how impactful was Pau Gasol to the Lakers championship in 2009? He was Kobe's second best player, and he had numbers incredibly similar to Chris Bosh. How about Kevin Garnett for the Boston Celtics in 2008? He also had numbers incredibly similar to Bosh upon joining Miami. And yet, Pau Gasol and Kevin Garnett are celebrated as the second best players of their championship teams, while Bosh has to hear that he's not even a part of the quote Big Two, because he was willing to sacrifice some of his production. Historically, whenever a Big Three assembles, it is completely normal for at least one of those guys to see his numbers plummet, as he becomes the third scoring option. It happened to Wilt Chamberlain when he joined Jerry West and Elgin Baylor in 1968. It happened to Ray Allen when he joined Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett in 2007. And it happened to Kevin Love when he joined LeBron James and Kyrie Irving in 2014. the commonality between all of those third options is that they were all able to win their first championship because they were willing to make the sacrifices. So yes, it was a big three, and Chris Bosh deserves more respect. Upon uniting, they didn't celebrate in a concert-like atmosphere simply because LeBron joined Dwayne Wade and a role player, but rather it was because they were legitimately three superstars, who each earned an all-star selection in all 4 years of them being teammates. Each star player played a monumental role in their team's success, as they won 2 championships in the span of 4 seasons. So what do you guys think? Does Chris Bosh deserve more credit, or does Rich Paul actually have a point? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. Today's video is a little bit different. I've been an NBA fan for as long as I've been alive, but with that being said, I am not old enough to have seen Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Michael Jordan make their entire rise throughout the NBA. Yes, I was watching those players over and over again on my dad's VHS tapes. But the fact is, as soon as I was able to think for myself and engage in the basketball community, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Michael Jordan were already all-time greats. On the other hand, there's players like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Steph Curry. And in their cases, I was actually old enough to have witnessed their entire careers. And I do remember the talking points about them as they were entering the NBA, in the middle of their careers, and at the end of their careers. I remember what it was like to have questions about whether or not Kobe Bryant would one day be as great as Michael Jordan. I remember what it was like to have questions if LeBron James is actually being overhyped. And I remember a time where we all thought Steph Curry wouldn't pan out because of the injuries. But I think each and every one of us who are long enough to witness these players' careers had one moment where we knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this guy was gonna be one of the greatest players of all time. There are some iconic moments that people think of for each of these players, but honestly, I felt like I had a pretty unique perspective on each of them. So I thought I'd share them with you guys and then ask you in the comment section below, when did you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that a great player would be an all-time great? First off, let's start with Kobe Bryant. And Kobe's is going to be a little bit different, because we knew early on he was going to be a really, really great player. Ever since he had entered the NBA straight out of high school in 1996, he was receiving comparisons to Michael Jordan. And early on, we witnessed iconic moment after iconic moment in his career. One of the major ones was Game 4 of the 2000 NBA Finals, where he took over the game after Shaq had fouled out and hit clutch basket after clutch basket. I think it's fair to say that a lot of us knew that he was going to be an all-time great in that moment. But in Kobe's case specifically, I'm looking at it from the angle of when I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he was going to be one of the greatest scorers the game had ever seen. Because for a while, that wasn't actually all that obvious. In his rookie season, he averaged about 7 points per game. That increased to 15 in his sophomore season, 19 in his third season, and 22 points per game in his fourth season. The big moment for me came on January 14th, 2002. Shaquille O'Neal had just been ejected and suspended on the previous game against the Chicago Bulls after he basically tried to end Brad Miller right on the spot. Up to this point, I had witnessed several times Kobe take over offensively when Shaq was absent, and this was yet another one of those nights. When Kobe came out of the gates against Memphis, he was extremely aggressive, and he was hitting shot after shot with ease. He was so on fire this night that he had the second 50-point game of his career, and it was actually his career high as he scored 56 points. The thing is, Kobe Bryant didn't even play in the fourth quarter of that contest. He scored 56 points in 3 quarters alone. It wasn't just what he did, but it was the ease in which he did it, and the Lakers had a 39-point victory as a result. I remember vividly telling my dad that one day, when he is no longer teammates with Shaq, that Kobe was going to break scoring records. And you all know what eventually happened. The following season, Kobe would go on to have 9 straight games with at least 40 points. Later on, he would score 50 points in 4 straight games, he would have 62 points in 3 quarters alone, and he would have an 81-point game in which he scored 55 points in the second half alone. So yeah, Kobe was arguably the most explosive shooting guard in the history of the NBA. But that was foreshadowed, and the moment I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Kobe was on his way to becoming this type of scorer was on this game against Memphis, where he dropped 56 points in just 3 quarters. The next player is LeBron James, and let me tell you, I remember the hype for Victor Wembanyama. I remember the hype for Zion Williamson. And I can tell you, I have never, ever seen a player as hyped coming into the NBA as LeBron James. This guy was on the cover of all of the magazines. He was receiving all of the comparisons, he was doing East Bay dunks in high school, and I remember people illegally giving him gifts trying to entice him to join their squad. People weren't just assuming this guy was going to be great, but they were saying he was a lock to be one of the greatest players of all time. So just like his Cleveland Cavaliers teammates, I was skeptical about LeBron coming into the NBA. Was he really, truly as good as everyone was claiming? And as a die-hard Kobe Bryant fan at the time, I remember wanting to see Kobe own this guy whenever they matched up one-on-one. So I think it's fair to say that I wasn't very quick to jump on the LeBron James hype train. But the moment I knew, beyond any doubt, that he was going to be one of the greatest players of all time was on May 31st, 2007, in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Detroit Pistons. At the time, the Pistons were one of the powerhouses of the Eastern Conference, and from top to bottom, their squad was way more talented. LeBron was only 22 years old, so I hadn't put much expectations upon him in this situation. But what he did was arguably one of the top 3 greatest playoff performances in NBA history, as he carried the Cleveland Cavaliers on his back. And I know that the word carried gets thrown around quite a bit in the NBA, but in this instance, it was totally justified. On this night, LeBron scored all of the Cavaliers' final 25 points to end the game, and he did it with clutch basket after clutch basket. Steve Kerr, who was assisting and calling the game, said that this was unbelievable. This was Jordan-esque. Up to this point, I was resistant to embrace LeBron James, but I witnessed him bury ridiculous shot after ridiculous shot, and take over the fourth quarter, overtime, and the second overtime on his way to beating one of the best teams in the entire league. This was the moment where I actually started to question, will he one day be the greatest player of all time? The next player is Steph Curry, and I actually have seen people talk about this in the past on YouTube. And they claim that the moment Steph arrived on the scene was in the 2012 to 2013 season against the New York Knicks. At Madison Square Garden, in front of a nationally televised audience, Steph Curry dropped 54 points on 11 three-pointers made. But I gotta be honest, I didn't see that game as it was all going down. For me, that moment for Steph Curry came in that same season, but 2 months later. And it was actually Kobe Bryant's famous Achilles game. On this channel, I've talked about extensively how epic this game was for Kobe Bryant, as he was dragging the Lakers into the playoffs after a tumultuous season, as he was hitting clutch shot after clutch shot and pushing through injury after injury, until he inevitably went down with the Achilles tear right before burying 2 free throws to give the Lakers some hope. The craziest part about this game that almost no one talks about is right as Kobe had his last game as an MVP candidate, Steph Curry rose to superstardom. Because many people forget, Steph was absolutely on fire this night, as he was trading basket after basket with Kobe Bryant. On the night, Steph had 47 points, 9 assists, and 6 rebounds, as he was 17 of 31 from the field and made 9 three-point attempts. He looked every bit as good as Kobe Bryant. The cherry on top, and what I believe was a very, very special moment, was the final shot of the game, as Steph Curry heaved this backcourt shot that had Lakers fans gasping their breath. Everyone believed that that shot could have gone in, and then the longtime Lakers commentator Stu Lance famously said,
"Are you kidding me? They ought to give Steph Curry points for doing just that. That young man is dangerous."
This was the moment that I truly realized Steph Curry was on his way to being one of the all-time greats. This guy just wasn't normal in 2013. And then what do you know? A couple years later, he's an MVP. A year after that, he's a unanimous MVP and the leader of the greatest regular season team of all time. And now, we know him today as one of the top 12 players in NBA history. So those are just my thoughts, but now I want to hear yours. What was a moment that you knew a great player was going to be one of the all-time greats? The Sacramento Kings of the early 2000s are widely seen as one of the greatest teams to never win a championship, and that's probably because they should have won a championship, as it is believed by many in the basketball community that they were screwed out of a championship opportunity in the 2002 Western Conference Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers. For obvious reasons, the talent, depth, and chemistry of that Kings team deserves to be honored and remembered as if they were past NBA champions. But the thing is, usually when people talk about that squad in the present day, they talk about stars like Chris Webber and Mike Bibby. But one member of that roster was equally impactful to those players, yet rarely gets any of the attention. His name is Peja Stojakovic. This guy was a lethal offensive weapon who was way ahead of his time. He was terrifying on the perimeter, as arguably the most dangerous sniper of his era. People forget just how special and unique this athlete was, as he played the game like Ray Allen and Reggie Miller, but he was 6 foot 10 inches tall. As a Lakers fan who vividly remembers all of their playoff battles, I can tell you that we were terrified of this guy. Give him just a second of daylight and we were sure he was going to punish us for it. Now, Peja had a modest start to his NBA career, as he averaged 8 points per game in his rookie season and 11 points per game in his sophomore season. But in his third year, he was made a full-time starter, and this boost of confidence was exactly what his game needed, as he increased his scoring to 20 points per game on tremendous efficiency splits. He was always an off-ball threat, as he kept lurking, moving, and waiting for his opportunity to swing the momentum with a massive 3-ball. With that being said, he had the handle and the ability to make a play for himself whenever he wanted to. This Sacramento squad was known for their beautiful ball movement and their team-first mindset, and Stojakovic willingly sacrificed some of his own opportunities to blend into this system. But there's no doubt in my mind that if he had been in another situation during his prime years, then he could have filled up the stat sheet to an even greater extent than he did. It wasn't just his 3-point shooting, but his shooting touch was pure all over the court, as he led the NBA in free throw percentage twice, and he has one of the greatest career free throw percentages in NBA history, at a stellar 90%. He wasn't just a key contributor for Sacramento, but he was one of their leading stars, as he was second on the team in scoring in both 2001 and 2002, trailing only Chris Webber. Now, what many people forget about their epic 7-game series with the Lakers in 2002 is the fact that Peja wasn't even healthy for it. He missed the first 4 games of that series due to an injury, and when he eventually returned for the final 3 games, it was clear that he wasn't himself, as he put up horrible numbers and horrible efficiency splits. The timing couldn't have possibly been any worse, as this was the best opportunity that this Kings team would ever have at winning a championship. Now, although the prime of this Kings group had come and gone, Peja was still yet to see his individual peak. During the 2003 to 2004 season, Stojakovic would take his game to the next level. It was mostly out of necessity, as their leading superstar Chris Webber had to have microfracture knee surgery, resulting in Webber missing 59 out of the 82 regular season games. For the first time, stepping into the leading role was the perimeter assassin Peja Stojakovic, and it's a role he thrived in. He put up some career-high averages of 24.2 points, 6.3 rebounds, and 1.3 steals on absolutely deadly shooting splits. Against all of the odds, Peja led his Kings to a remarkable 55-27 record, good enough for the 4th seed in a stacked Western Conference. And as a result, Peja finished in 4th place in the MVP voting, which was ahead of young superstars like Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, and LeBron James. Unfortunately, this was the very best that we would ever see from Peja, because his back and neck injuries would begin to limit his time and affect his productivity. After subtle declines from year to year, he eventually found himself in New Orleans with Chris Paul and David West. To a lesser degree, he was impactful for this Western Conference contender, who surprised many when they won 56 games in the 07-08 season, where Peja poured in 16 points per game, including an excellent 44% from three-point range. In terms of his skills and abilities, he had a lot left in the tank, but sadly, his body had something else in mind, as the back and neck issues took their toll. By the start of the 2010-2011 season, he was 33 years old and was just a shell of his former self. With that being said, he was in the right place at the right time, as he was a part of the 2011 Dallas Mavericks, who went all the way to the NBA Finals and who shockingly defeated the Big Three Miami Heat. Peja only scored a grand total of 2 points in those NBA Finals, but he was able to end his NBA career with a championship that he deserved in Sacramento. The fact that he had such a short career and played for small market teams resulted in him becoming an afterthought in the years since his retirement. And that's unfortunate, because the truth of the matter is that at his best, Peja Stojakovic was one of the most dangerous and efficient perimeter players in the entire league. In total, he earned 3 All-Star selections and an All-NBA selection in 2004. He was also the NBA's three-point contest winner in back-to-back seasons in 2002 and in 2003. Given his size and skill set, there is zero doubt in my mind that Peja would have tore up this modern NBA, as the rules and style of play in this present game are basically tailor-made for his abilities. When we talk about the greatest what-ifs in NBA history, there's usually several different names that come to mind, like Len Bias, Grant Hill, Greg Oden, and Derrick Rose, just to name a few. One of the players who typically isn't mentioned in that group is Earvin Magic Johnson. And to a certain extent, I get it. Magic had a Hall of Fame career. He won 5 NBA championships, 3 Finals MVPs, and 3 league MVPs. He made 10 All-NBA teams and made it all the way to the NBA Finals a total of 9 times in his career. So relatively to the other all-time greats, he had a very full and successful career. But the truth is, that was all achieved in what should have been the first half of his career. That's because on November 7th, 1991, Magic shocked the basketball world when he announced publicly that he had obtained HIV. And as a result, he was retiring immediately from the NBA. Now, many people assume that this retirement happened in the twilight of Magic's career. But the truth is, that's only because we've grown accustomed to this retirement scenario since 1991. In reality, Magic was nowhere close to the twilight of his career. He was the league MVP just 1 season prior, and he was the league MVP runner-up to Michael Jordan in 1991. He led his Lakers to the NBA Finals right before his retirement, and in his final game before he made the announcement, he put up a monstrous triple-double. He was only 31 years old when he played his final game in 1991. Think about that for a second. That's like LeBron James retiring in 2016 and Steph Curry retiring in 2020. Just imagine how different their legacies would have been if that had been the case. From this sense, Magic Johnson was a major what-if. He had the highest career average for assists in NBA history, so if he had kept playing, he may have ended up as the NBA's all-time leader by the end of his career. The Lakers also remained very competitive throughout the 1990s, so it is very possible that Magic could have made it to the NBA Finals several more times. Imagine if he had 13 or 14 Finals appearances by the end of his career. If Magic had played until he was 40 years old, like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, then that would have meant that Magic would have been teammates with Shaq and Kobe for the final 4 seasons of his career, including the 1999-2000 season, where the Lakers won the NBA championship. Imagine a world where half of Shaq and Kobe's years together, they had Magic Johnson running the floor as their point guard. In this universe, you have to wonder, would Magic have 8 or 9 championships? If that was the case, how could he not be viewed as the GOAT ahead of Michael Jordan? Now make no mistake, I know full well that Magic did come back for the 95-96 season and promptly retired at the conclusion of that year. But here's the thing. I don't think Magic retires again in '96 if he never retired the first time in 1991. When Magic came back in 1995, he was trying to adapt to a young team that wasn't used to his leadership and mindset. Famously, players like Nick Van Exel and Cedric Ceballos didn't mesh well with Magic Johnson, and there was jealousy and chemistry issues due to there being a new sheriff in town. It ended up being a chaotic and tumultuous season, to say the least. And when Magic retired for the final time at the end of the 1996 season, it wasn't because he had nothing left in the tank, but it was because he was tired of the drama and wasn't enjoying the team as much as he used to. If Magic never retires the first time in 1991, then there's never this awkward changing of leaderships and atmospheres. And instead of Magic learning to play with guys like Van Exel and Ceballos, they would instead be learning to play with him. I truly believe that if Magic never retired due to HIV, then he likely ends his career as the greatest winner in NBA history since Bill Russell. Maybe that universe even makes more sense in the grand scheme of basketball, because after all, Magic Johnson was the ultimate teammate. He was the greatest example of a guy who made his teammates better. In the very first season of his career, he started at center in place of an injured Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and won the championship with some jaw-dropping numbers. Yes, he won championships with Kareem by his side, and people usually use that fact to discredit him. But in the first season after Kareem's retirement, Magic led his Lakers to a 63-win season. And the season after that, Magic stunned the basketball world by taking the Lakers to the NBA Finals once again. Regardless of the weapons at his disposal, Magic was going to be competitive year in and year out, and he proved that time and time again on the basketball court. So now it's your turn. If Magic had never been forced to retire in 1991, how do you think we would view his legacy today? In the epic history of the NBA, some stories stand out above the rest, not just because of the stats we read in the box score afterwards, but because of how it felt in the moment. They're passed down from generation to generation, from old fans to new fans. And what makes those stories last long after the final buzzer is when the greats who lived it, the athletes themselves, can recall them with perfect clarity, as if they never left the moment at all, either still basking in the glory or drowning in the nightmare. This is one of those stories. And to explain some of the context, let's go back almost 25 years ago, to June 14th, 2000. It was Game 4 of the 2000 NBA Finals. The Lakers were up 2-1 over the Indiana Pacers. The series was hanging in the balance. A 21-year-old Kobe Bryant had missed all of Game 3 and most of Game 2 with a sprained ankle. Now, just days later, he was not only back, but was about to play 47 of the 53 total minutes on what he would later call a quote, throbbing ankle. The Lakers were led, of course, by the most dominant force in the league at the time, Shaquille O'Neal, who was at his absolute apex. He was averaging an insane 38.7 points and 18.7 rebounds per game through the first 3 games of Shaq's first NBA Finals for the Lakers. But in this game, however, it wouldn't be Shaq who finished the story. After the first quarter, the Lakers looked flat, going down 10 points early. Kobe had as many points as he had turnovers. Shaq was only 1 of 5 from the field, and Reggie Miller was already in rhythm with 10 quick points. Indiana led the entire first half, and at halftime they were up 54-51. The Lakers were ice cold from distance as a team, 1 for 7 from 3, and both Shaq and Kobe were in foul trouble with 3 each at the end of the first half. Early in the third quarter, with the Lakers still searching for control, Kobe picked up a potentially killer 4th foul. Most coaches would have pulled him immediately, but Phil Jackson did not, and Kobe made him look like a genius. In the span of just 3 minutes, Kobe doubled his scoring total, jumping from 6 points to 12 points and shaking off the rust of the first half. And by the time the third quarter ended, the Mamba had 16 points and was starting to take control of the tempo. Entering the fourth, the Lakers led for the first time in the game, 80-77. But Reggie Miller, who unusually was 0-7 in the fourth quarter through 3 games, decided that Game 4 would be different. He scored 13 points in the fourth quarter alone, hitting 5 of his 6 shots, including 3 for 3 from downtown that would keep Indiana breathing. Shaq, meanwhile, did everything he could to carry the load, dropping 13 points in the final period of regulation, but missing his last 4 free throws down the stretch. Now Kobe was quieter on the stat sheet with just 4 points in the quarter, but he was slowly starting to build towards something much bigger. Now I could sit here and walk you through every second of what happened next, or we can watch a rare moment where 2 legends, one rising and one aging, remember it for themselves. Kobe Bryant shared his memory of this time with Shaq just before we tragically lost him. And Reggie Miller just recently told his side of the story on the All the Smoke podcast. So what you're about to hear is both parts of this iconic story, told by these 2 all-time great players. Take a listen.
My favorite Kobe moment is in the finals in Indiana. I'm like, damn, I let the team down again. And you put your hand on my shoulder and said, don't worry, big fella, I got it. Always knew you was a bad cat, but that moment right there, because you had no fear. I was like,
Well, I knew how much it meant to you tactically. I don't think anybody knows this, but yeah, we were filming. I was filming some show the summer before, and Reggie Miller was up there, UCLA.
Kobe and I did a shoot. At the time, you guys remember on MTV, The Real World, the cast, the people that all lived in the house. This is when reality TV was just starting. And this was a chance, he and I, this is before we made it to the finals.
And I said, okay, they got a really good team in Indiana. We might see these guys. And I said, let's play one-on-one.
Gail D'Agostino, who, she worked with both of us. And she came to me and she's like, hey, I'm just letting you know, Kobe's gonna wanna play you one-on-one. I'm at the height of mine. He's just, this is his second or third year, maybe, second year.
And we played one-on-one. I proceeded to really measure him.
So we're on the court. He's like, teach me that step back.
And see what he liked to do defensively, see where he moved, see where he was weak at, what I could exploit.
Like, what are you looking at? Are you looking at the feet, the knees? Like, how do you do it going left, and how are you doing it right? Like, don't they close? So I'm out there teaching them and doing all this. Fast forward to the finals.
I file out.
We're thinking, we about ready to tie this thing up. They had won the first 2 in Staples. We won game 3. We're about ready to tie this thing up.
And so when that happened in the finals, we were here, I knew what I had. I knew what I could take. I knew what he would give me. And it was just a matter of just measuring him and going to work.
Damn Kobe Bryant turned into, and not only did he turn into the reincarnation of MJ, that same that I was teaching him, those step backs.
He hit that 3, yeah.
He's hitting it on me. Wah, wah, wah.
So it was a thought-out attack for him.
This dude was prepping for this moment 3 years ago. He is using this, what I taught him, on me and us. They win that game, they win the series in 6.
Now, in the midst of all this drama, a crucial detail from this game has been largely forgotten. On the last possession of the game, a terrible foul called on Rick Fox, occurring before the ball was even inbounded, gifted Indiana a technical free throw, and possession with 5 seconds remaining. A successful three-pointer would now win this game, and Indiana had the NBA's most lethal three-point shooter ever at this point in time. Reggie Miller, with the weight of the game on his shoulders, managed to create a decent look from the right wing. An impressive feat considering everyone in the arena knew the ball was destined for him. The shot, sadly for Miller, clanked off the back iron. This near miss, the what could have been, must have been a heavy burden for Miller to bear for all these years. And this was his one and only opportunity in the NBA Finals. If luck is really what happens when preparation meets opportunity, then in Game 4 of the 2000 NBA Finals, Kobe Bryant was one of the luckiest men alive. But it wasn't just random. It wasn't just a fluke. Looking back, it all makes sense. The way Kobe carried himself, the confidence in his eyes, the way he rose up and hit that first shot over Reggie Miller, you could just tell he knew. He knew he was the most prepared player on the court. He knew this moment might come when he was with Reggie at UCLA years before. And when it finally did, under the bright lights of the NBA Finals, Kobe didn't hesitate. He was ready. For most of his legendary career, LeBron James has carried an unusual burden. Not just the weight of expectations, but the weight of scrutiny. From the moment he stepped onto the NBA hardwood at 18, LeBron has lived his life under a microscope. We watched him grow, evolve, stumble, and soar, all under the relentless glare of the social media era, a platform quick to amplify both great success and perceived shortcomings. Since the day he was drafted into the NBA, he wasn't just compared to NBA players. He was compared to legends from the very moment he was in the public eye. And while much of the basketball world did admire his brilliance on the court, others found plenty of reasons to critique him. He was too passive, too selfless, but one of the biggest was that he was not enough of a killer on the court. When people talk about cold-blooded competitors, they bring up Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, players who, when they smelled blood, didn't hesitate. They didn't defer, they destroyed. Now, by the time we reached the 2017 to 2018 season, LeBron James had certainly cultivated a clutch gene, silencing many of his doubters with game-winning heroics etched into NBA lore. Yet despite this, the whispers persisted. Memories of moments like the 2010 Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics and the agonizing 2011 NBA Finals against the Mavericks, where he seemed to shrink under the immense pressure, lingered in fans' minds. Even his triumphant championship victory with the Cavaliers in 2016, a historic 3-1 comeback, was not so much a dominant display of force, but more of a desperate rally with their backs firmly against the wall. But the 2017 to 2018 season and the ensuing playoffs would become the stage for LeBron James to finally, unequivocally, silence this particular criticism. It was his moment to demonstrate to the world that beneath the layers of playmaking brilliance, he was ruthless. He was unrelenting. This wasn't the LeBron we had grown used to seeing. This was something darker, more focused. This was the LeBron that many doubted existed. To understand how monumental this season was for LeBron, we need to go back to the 2017 playoffs. LeBron was coming off of his 7th straight NBA Finals appearance. No one had done that since Bill Russell. In that 2017 Finals, LeBron became the first player in history to average a triple-double on the league's biggest stage. And yet, the Cavaliers had lost. Something was breaking apart behind the scenes. The relationship between LeBron and Kyrie had deteriorated, and it showed during the 2017 playoffs. According to teammate James Jones, there were many days during the playoffs when Kyrie didn't speak to a single teammate. The tension, palpable to those within the Cavs organization, began with Irving's growing desire to step out of LeBron's considerate shadow and environment. Then, in the offseason, the departure of former general manager David Griffin, which then led to the revelation that Cleveland had even considered trading Irving to the Indiana Pacers for Paul George, all reportedly stunned the fiercely independent point guard. His desire for autonomy, to lead his own team and cultivate his own culture, outweighed the allure of playing alongside of one of the greatest players of all time. Reports even surfaced that Irving threatened to sit out the entire 17-18 season and undergo knee surgery if his demand was not met. The Cavaliers were forced to deal their young superstar. In August 2017, Kyrie Irving was traded to the Boston Celtics. The Cavs received a package involving Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, and Brooklyn's 2018 first-round pick. Now, Isaiah Thomas was coming off of an incredible season, averaging 28.9 points per game and earning the nickname King of the Fourth for his late-game heroics. But that same fantastic regular season had taken a toll on the smaller guard's frame. Thomas suffered a serious hip injury that would drastically affect his future. He wouldn't return to the court until January of 2018, and until then, LeBron was essentially carrying the Cavaliers by himself. Fortunately for Cleveland, Kevin Love stepped up in Thomas's absence, enjoying a resurgent start to the year. By the time Thomas was finally cleared to play in his first game in a Cavaliers uniform, the team held a respectable 24-12 record, good enough for the third seed in a middling Eastern Conference. However, the chemistry between LeBron James and Isaiah Thomas upon his return never materialized, and the Cavaliers' performance suffered as a result. From Thomas's debut on January 2nd until just before the trade deadline on February 6th, the team stumbled to a dismal 6-10 record. Their defense was the second worst in the league during this stretch. The period of disarray was at its apex, with an especially horrible second-half collapse against the Orlando Magic, a team at the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings with no realistic playoff aspirations. There were inexplicable lapses in effort, with LeBron visibly disengaged on multiple possessions, at times allowing the offense to function at a disjointed 4-on-5. The result was an embarrassing 116-98 defeat, a low point that amplified the growing sense of crisis surrounding the Cavaliers. The humiliating loss to the Magic served as a stark wake-up call. Between that game and their next contest against Jimmy Butler and the Minnesota Timberwolves, trade discussions began to swirl with increasing urgency within the Cavaliers organization. It was clear that drastic measures were needed to salvage their season and appease their increasingly frustrated superstar. In that pivotal matchup against the Timberwolves, a noticeable shift occurred in LeBron James's demeanor. A fire seemed to reignite within him, a passion that had been conspicuously absent for over a month. He delivered a virtuoso performance, tallying 37 points, 10 rebounds, and 15 assists. But the box score was only part of the story. In the dying moments of overtime, LeBron showcased a renewed intensity. First swatting away a potential game-winning shot by Jimmy Butler, and then, with ice in his veins, calmly sinking a game-winning basket on the ensuing possession. And then, almost immediately after that thriller against the Wolves, the Cavs blew up their roster. They traded away nearly half their team, including Isaiah Thomas, Dwayne Wade, Derrick Rose, Jay Crowder, Iman Shumpert, and Channing Frye. In return, they brought in younger and more athletic players: George Hill, Jordan Clarkson, Rodney Hood, and Larry Nance Jr. Reinvigorated by the new additions and sensing an opportunity to compete for yet another championship for his city, LeBron James elevated his game to an even higher level in the final 30 games of the regular season. He averaged 29.5 points, 9.8 rebounds, and 10 assists on 54.1% shooting to close out the regular season. He was doing everything: scoring, playmaking, leading, and make no mistake, he was the only reason Cleveland stayed afloat. LeBron's Cavaliers managed to secure a 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. While many analysts and fans acknowledged LeBron's individual brilliance, there was a widespread skepticism about the team's overall chances of making another deep playoff run. The prevailing sentiment was that reaching the NBA Finals for a 4th consecutive year would be an exceptionally arduous challenge, even for a player of LeBron's caliber. In the first round, the Cavs faced the Indiana Pacers, a gritty, hungry team led by Victor Oladipo. The Pacers came out firing, delivering a decisive 98-80 blow in Game 1, sending a clear message that this series would be no easy path for the defending Eastern Conference champions. The two teams traded blows over the next 3 games, splitting them at 2 apiece. This set the stage for a pivotal Game 5 in Cleveland, a must-win for both squads. In this high-stakes encounter, LeBron James delivered a performance for the ages, scoring a staggering 44 of his team's 98 points. including a clutch game-winning three-pointer that sealed a crucial victory and gave the Cavaliers a 3-2 series lead. It was a dagger, a statement, and a glimpse of what was coming. This game marked a discernible shift in LeBron's approach. This was not the typically unselfish player always looking to make the optimal pass. This was a man determined to will his team to victory through sheer offensive force, undeterred by any adversity. In that moment, LeBron was destroying any remaining narratives about his lack of killer instinct. This wasn't LeBron making the quote right basketball play. This was LeBron saying, "I'll take it from here." He was becoming the cold-blooded scorer that the basketball world had long wondered if he could be. The series returned to Indiana for Game 6, where the Pacers fought valiantly to force a decisive Game 7 back in Cleveland. In that winner-take-all contest, LeBron James, playing all but 4 minutes, exerted an almost suffocating control over the game's tempo. He deliberately slowed the pace to an incredibly methodical 87.2 possessions per 48 minutes, a stark contrast to the league's regular season average of 97.3. In this slower, more deliberate environment, LeBron was able to dictate the flow, meticulously dissecting the Pacers' defense. He scored 45 points, grabbed 8 rebounds, dished out 7 assists, and even snagged 4 steals, carrying his team on his back and securing their passage to the second round. Next up, the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors had entered the 2017-18 season with a singular goal: to secure the coveted number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs, thereby guaranteeing home court advantage, and, they hoped, finally vanquishing the LeBron James-led Cleveland Cavaliers, who had eliminated them in the previous 2 postseasons. Their mission was successful. Behind their all-star backcourt duo of Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, the Raptors had a franchise-best 59-win season, and indeed claimed the top seed. This was supposed to be Toronto's year, their opportunity to finally dethrone the king. The significance of this contest cannot be overstated. If LeBron James was to guide his underdog Cavaliers past this formidable Raptors squad, he would need to be more than just good. He would need to be ice cold, instilling a level of fear and intimidation in his opponents unlike anything seen before in his career. What transpired was a performance of such utter dominance against an entire team that the internet renamed the city of Toronto to LeBronto. In a stunning 4-game sweep, LeBron averaged an unbelievable 34 points, 8.3 rebounds, and 11.3 assists per game, shooting an incredibly efficient 55.3% from the field. But the raw statistics failed to capture the extent of LeBron's mastery in this series. It was how he dismantled the Raptors that was truly breathtaking. He hit impossible turnaround fadeaway jumpers from seemingly every angle in Game 2. He casually banked in a 1-foot floater off the glass to win Game 3 at the buzzer, with the Cavaliers not even bothering to call a timeout. By the end of the series, LeBronto was born. The Raptors, utterly demoralized, would be forced to completely overhaul their core in the ensuing offseason. The Eastern Conference Finals presented a fascinating contrast. On one side stood the veteran-laden Cleveland Cavaliers, their sights set on a 4th consecutive NBA Finals appearance. On the other, a youthful and exceptionally talented Boston Celtics team, who had weathered early season injuries to their key veterans and forged an improbable playoff run around a core of an average age of just 25.1 years old. The series that unfolded was a grueling back-and-forth battle, a true dogfight that pushed both teams to their limits. Inevitably, the Eastern Conference crown would be decided in yet another dramatic Game 7 for the Cavaliers and LeBron James, who by this point had been physically and mentally exhausted after navigating such a demanding playoff journey. Once again, Game 7 came down to the pace of play, which LeBron deliberately dragged down to a snail's pace of 86. He was consciously pulling this young, athletic Celtics team into an era of basketball they had only witnessed as children. a slower, more physical style that was commonplace in the mid-2000s when LeBron was entering the league, and a style with which he was incredibly familiar. This deliberate shift in tempo seemed to rattle the Celtics, whose youthful exuberance was stifled. They shot an abysmal 7 of 39 from three-point range, their worst performance from beyond the arc all season. LeBron, displaying an almost superhuman endurance, played all 48 minutes, scoring 35 points, grabbing 15 rebounds, and dishing out 9 assists. He willed his team to victory, securing his 8th consecutive NBA Finals appearance, an achievement matched only by the legendary Bill Russell. This improbable triumph set the stage for the 4th consecutive NBA Finals showdown between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors. While matchup fatigue was undeniably a factor for many viewers, Game 1 of this series would witness arguably the greatest scoring performance of LeBron James's illustrious career. Facing the overwhelming firepower of a Warriors team led by Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, LeBron knew he would have to play near-perfect basketball just to keep pace, and in Game 1, he basically did. He poured in an astounding 51 points, along with 8 rebounds and 8 assists, shooting an incredibly efficient 59.4% from the field, trading basket for basket with the seemingly unstoppable Warriors. Tragically, LeBron's Herculean effort was ultimately overshadowed by one of the most infamous blunders in NBA Finals history, a late-game miscue by his teammate J.R. Smith. This blunder seemed to deflate all of the remaining energy and motivation LeBron poured into this game, and the Warriors ultimately prevailed in overtime, 124-114. The frustration and anger LeBron felt after this devastating loss reportedly led him to break his hand by punching the whiteboard in the locker room. He apparently played the remainder of the NBA Finals series with this significant injury, later admitting that he, quote, let the emotions get the best of me. But in defeat, something had changed. For the most part, people no longer questioned LeBron James's killer instinct. They no longer doubted if he could take over a game in the biggest moments. He did it over and over again, against younger teams, better teams, and longer odds. In 2018, LeBron didn't just silence his critics, he redefined his legacy. He didn't need a super team. He didn't need a perfect roster. All he needed was the ball, the moment, and a reason. And he gave us one of the most iconic playoff runs in NBA history. It wasn't about stats, it was about mentality. This was about showing the world that LeBron James wasn't just a great basketball player, but this season, he was a killer, and he proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Steph Curry is simply amazing. He's a 4-time NBA champion, a 2-time MVP, he's the all-time leader in three-pointers made, and he's now in the argument for being considered as a top 10 player in NBA history. If you're a fan of Curry, then you probably clicked on this video ready to come to his defense, as you assumed that I'm about to go on this giant rant criticizing him. Well, put down your pitchfork and torch, because I'm actually doing the opposite, and pointing out how the perception of Curry and his impact has ultimately affected how much he's appreciated or lack thereof. Let me ask you longtime basketball fans a question. Remember the narrative that you couldn't win an NBA championship as a jump shooting team? That existed for a very, very long time in the NBA. The narrative was basically that soft teams were not built for the postseason. The belief was that when the playoffs started, in order to succeed, you had to embrace a grit and grind type of approach, one that emphasized physicality and defense. And a jump shooting three-point team was generally viewed as the opposite of that. For the most part, this was basically a true narrative all the way through the 2010 NBA Finals. But in 2011, the Dallas Mavericks won the championship as primarily a jump shooting team. But they were more seen as an exception to the rule, because the Mavericks were the underdog in the finals and they had been failing to get it done years before that. And then, after their championship run, they were unable to repeat their success for the rest of Dirk Nowitzki's career. On the other hand, in 2015, the Golden State Warriors won the championship as a jump shooting team. And then they won it again, and again, and again. By the early stages of their dynasty, the narrative that jump shooting teams couldn't win championships was officially and completely dead. Under Steph Curry's leadership on the court, the Warriors changed the perception of playoff basketball and the entire concept of winning basketball. Along with that, Steph Curry won the league MVP in 2015, and then in 2016, he proceeded to become the first ever unanimous MVP winner in NBA history, as he led his Warriors to a record-breaking 73-9 season. Prior to the beginning of the 2016 NBA Finals, many people were beginning to claim that Steph Curry had now surpassed LeBron James as the best player in the NBA. It's hard to say if the majority of people were saying this, but at the very least, a large portion of the basketball community was making this claim. This wasn't just any player temporarily becoming the face of the league, but this was a 6'3" jump shooter. This was a guy who made an NBA record 402 three-point attempts on the season, when no other player in NBA history had ever made it to 300. This was jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring, and unlike anything we had ever seen before. We had never seen someone make so many 30-foot bombs so regularly and so casually. It was literally amazing. And not only was he must-see TV, but he was quickly becoming almost everyone's favorite player to watch. He hadn't just changed the narratives about winning basketball, but he made basketball fans reimagine what the best player in the NBA could look like. It didn't have to be a towering Goliath like Wilt Chamberlain. It didn't have to be a stylish unicorn of an athlete like Michael Jordan. It didn't have to be a scary combination of size and speed like LeBron James. Now, people believe that the best of the best could simply be a skinny, undersized player with a nifty handle and an incredible jump shot. This period of time during the 2016 regular season was when Steph was the most celebrated. Sure, maybe he's moved up on most people's all-time lists since then. But as for the adoration and wonder of Steph Curry, it had never been stronger than it was in this moment in time. Then, things started to change. In the 2016 NBA Finals, the Warriors famously choked away a 3-1 lead, losing the championship series to LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Then soon after, the Warriors added a prime Kevin Durant to their 73-9 squad, and what was one of the most shocking acquisitions in basketball history. Overnight, the Warriors went from the organic Cinderella team that everyone was rooting for to the unfair juggernaut villain who took the easy road. With an absurdly stacked roster, the Warriors proceeded to win the championship in 2017 and in 2018. But many people believed that those were some of the most boring seasons in NBA history, due to the Warriors warping the balance of power in the league. To make matters worse, during Golden State's dynastic run, their former head coach Mark Jackson famously got all of the sports headlines when he said that Steph Curry ruined the game of basketball. Basically, he said that Steph's three-point shooting had been so impactful that it essentially inspired a young generation of basketball players to ignore other aspects of the game and focus almost exclusively on three-point shooting. To a certain extent, this seemed to be the case in the NBA as well, as other organizations were looking to replicate the Warriors' success, and inevitably, everyone began shooting an insane amount of threes. After the rise of Steph Curry, the league spiked to the highest volume of three-point shots in history, and it's a number that's still climbing to this very day. Over time, this came with its own series of drawbacks. NBA viewership has become a growing concern, as many old-school basketball fans have given up on the modern game, claiming that it's a dying league. There are many reasons to speculate as for the cause of declining viewership, but one of the most popular choices is how the NBA has been watered down as a jump shooting league that lacks any defense or diversity of styles. It's one thing for nostalgic fans to make this claim, But in the years since Curry's rise, active NBA legends like Greg Popovich, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James have said that the NBA has become too one-dimensional and too influenced by the three-point shot. Now more so than ever before, NBA fandom has become extremely divided, with some celebrating where the league is today, while others have tuned out almost completely, only occasionally engaging when it's about criticizing the modern product. And whether or not it's fair, Steph Curry is the face of this modern product. He ushered in this new era of NBA basketball, thanks to his skill and dedication. But what was once celebrated and seen as a marvelous wonder has now grown stale and repetitive in the eyes of many. To some, Steph Curry is the symbol and cause of what's wrong with the modern NBA. Now, is this fair to Steph Curry? Absolutely not. And I personally still cherish the talent and artistry of his game. I still fondly remember the way he captivated audiences between 2014 and 2016, and I don't think I will ever look back on those years with disgust. But the reality is, many people are not appreciative of his changing influence on the game like they once were, and as a whole, it's affecting his legacy and how he will be remembered by the masses. Steph Curry is one of the greatest players and one of the most influential players of all time, but he'll also be remembered as the player who split basketball fandom. One day, he was the face of the league and the media darling, and now today, he's the symbol of NBA division, and what is one of the sadder evolutions of a basketball legacy. You could call him the Zen Master, the Lord of the Rings, or simply the greatest coach in basketball history. Phil Douglas Jackson was not just a basketball mastermind, but a psychological mastermind as well. This guy knew how to motivate his players, how to push the right buttons, and how to get a team of egomaniacs to come together and achieve a common goal. Thanks to his incredible leadership, he was able to win 11 NBA championships and earn 13 trips to the conference finals in just 20 seasons of head coaching. Now, some of you may say, well, of course he won so much. Look at the talent he was blessed with. And although that is true, I would ask you in response, how did that talent fare without him? Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Kobe Bryant, and Shaquille O'Neal collectively played 33 seasons under Phil Jackson, and in that time, they had a combined total of 20 championship rings. Without Phil Jackson, those same superstar players played a combined total of 37 seasons, and in that time, they only won one championship ring. That fact alone should be enough to convince people of Phil's one-of-a-kind greatness as a head coach. But regardless, I'll continue to elaborate. If you ask me, what makes Phil Jackson so excellent has nothing to do with the X's and O's. Sure, he was a great coach from an X's and O's standpoint, but his bread and butter was his ability to get the most out of a variety of different individuals. Early in his career, the narrative about Michael Jordan was that he was a selfish ball hog, a guy who put his scoring before the team. And this is why people believed that he would never win nearly as many championships as Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Then Phil stepped in, convinced Jordan to give up the ball and play within the triangle offense system. And as a result, they immediately started collecting Larry O'Brien trophies. Shaq and Kobe were failing in the Western Conference playoffs time and time again, as they were seen as a group without solid leadership. Even in 1998, when they had 4 All-Stars on the team in Shaq, Kobe, Eddie Jones, and Nick Van Exel, they were unable to get it done. Then stepped in Phil, who taught them to work as a group and remain poised under pressure. And they proceeded to immediately win 3 straight championships. After writing a book where he literally called Kobe Bryant uncoachable, he rejoined forces with the Mamba and won 2 more championships with nearly a completely different roster. He took situations that were either shaky or volatile and turned them into championship moments. A perfect example of that is in the case of Dennis Rodman. You have to understand, Rodman was seen as a basket case before he joined the Bulls. He was viewed as an uncoachable locker room cancer, especially after his departures from Detroit and San Antonio. and many people believed that his antics would likely destroy the Bulls from within. Phil immediately built a relationship with Rodman and coached him in a unique way that would get the best out of a player that many doubted at the time. Even without the greatest rosters, there is plenty of evidence of Phil's elite coaching ability. For example, after Michael Jordan's first retirement, very few people expected the Bulls to remain in title contention. But Jackson coached the '94 Bulls to 55 wins and the second round of the playoffs. If it wasn't for one of the most controversial foul calls in NBA history, that team might have gone even further. Another example was the Lakers in 2006. Everyone gives Kobe credit for leading a team with starters like Smush Parker, Kwame Brown, and Luke Walton to 45 wins and a playoff berth. But it was Phil Jackson who coached that team, and no one ever gives him much credit, which is criminal when you consider the fact that Kobe was missing the playoffs the previous season with a different head coach. I understand the arguments for other coaches, but I don't believe any of those cases are nearly as strong, as there's simply no way that you luck your way into winning 11 championship rings, regardless of the talent on the roster.
Talk about Oscar Robertson. You're talking about the quintessential triple-double. Oscar was smooth. He was strong. He had a back-end move where he'd back you down into the paint. You couldn't stop him.
Oscar Robertson is the best basketball player I ever played against. I mean, he had no weakness.
When I look back in my career, he's the greatest player I ever played against, period.
People don't understand how dominant a player he was, especially in his younger years. If he had played now with a three-point shot, who knows what he would have done.
Oscar Palmer Robertson. Most of you know who this legend of NBA history is. The first player to ever average a triple-double over the course of a season, and still just one of only 2 players to ever accomplish the feat. But many people nowadays struggle to grasp the skill and legacy of Oscar. Was he just a selfish stat patter? Was he just a pretty good player who took advantage of a less advanced era? He also doesn't have many recognizably iconic highlights. All of these questions and unknowns make it difficult for many NBA fans to put his talent in perspective and figure out where he ranks among the greatest players of all time. That's where this video comes in, as we're diving into the career and evaluating the legacy of the man known as the Big O. Oscar Robertson was selected with the first overall pick in the 1960 NBA draft by the Cincinnati Royals. As a 22-year-old, Oscar was entering the NBA as one of the most pro-league ready rookies the game has ever seen. He was a 6'5" point guard with a strong build, and he knew how to use it. In his rookie campaign, Oscar took the league by storm, averaging 30.5 points, 10.1 rebounds, and 9.7 assists on 47.3% shooting in what is easily one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time. It pretty much goes without saying that he was that year's Rookie of the Year winner. Oscar's game wasn't flashy by any means. We recognize that today, but they knew it then too. There were certainly more exciting styles among his peers at the point guard position, but Oscar preferred a more patient and methodical approach, which doesn't translate to the most awe-inspiring highlights 60 years later. But it was effective, and that's what mattered. Many times, Oscar would simply back down his opponents and score from the post, using his IQ and his reliable jump shot. Scoring was just one of his many gifts, though. Another area he dominated was on the boards, as he used his anticipation and low center of gravity to secure his high rebounding numbers. Oscar's rebounding is a skill of his that I don't think he gets enough credit for, and there's several reasons for this. For one, in recent videos on this channel, we've talked about how rebounding numbers were inflated in the 1960s. The pace of play was faster at the time, which meant more shot attempts, and more shot attempts equals more rebounds. Not only that, but the league as a whole didn't shoot as efficiently back then, which means even more rebounds. That's why there were usually a handful of players averaging near 20 rebounds per game in that era. With that being said, you'd still be wrong to simply disregard Oscar's elite rebounding abilities, because although it was normal for players to get incredibly high rebounding numbers in that era, it wasn't normal for players like Oscar. In each of his first 5 seasons in the league, Oscar finished in the top 20 of rebounds per game leaders, ranking as high as 9th place overall. In each of those 5 seasons, Oscar was the only guard to finish in the top 20 in rebounds. With the game played more around the interior in those days, the rebounding department was dominated almost exclusively by all the big centers and forwards, but Oscar was the anomaly. And of course, we can't leave out his playmaking abilities, as he had great court vision, was a fantastic passer, and was constantly among the league leaders in assists. By only his sophomore season, Oscar was ready to have the year that would make him famous for decades to come, as he put up triple-double averages of 30.8 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 11.4 assists on 47.8% shooting, leading the Royals to their first winning season in 8 years. This iconic achievement made him a legend, as he was the only person to ever achieve the feat up until Russell Westbrook did it in 2017. But the craziest part is his triple-double achievement is actually so much better than people realize. Technically, 1962 was the only single season of his career where he averaged a triple-double, but he came very close to doing it several times. Some years, his assists would be well over 10, but the rebounds would be well below 10. And some years, the assists would be below 10, and the rebounds would be well over 10. Over the course of his first 5 seasons of his career, he averaged 30.3 points, 10.6 assists, and 10.4 rebounds on 48.6% shooting. That is ridiculous. So although he's famous for averaging a triple-double for a season, in reality, he averaged a triple-double for 5 seasons. Despite his constant incredible play, when it came to the playoffs, the Royals were constantly being eliminated at the hands of the far more talented Boston Celtics and Philadelphia 76ers. This ongoing theme of putting up monstrous numbers just to lose in the playoffs started to build some negative narratives about Oscar as a player, whether they were deserved or not. Some were starting to say that he had a selfish style, and that he was too ball dominant, and that he needed to be more comfortable in a free-flowing offense where he isn't calling all the shots. Although he remained extremely productive for years, with all of these narratives and stigmas going on, and with plenty of tension in the locker room for a number of reasons, the relationship between him and the Royals began to sour, and eventually he was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. At this point, this was basically the best thing that could have happened to an aging Oscar Robertson, because after being with a mediocre supporting cast for years, in Milwaukee, he would be joining a young and dominant Lou Alcindor, before he became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The combination of the 23-year-old Lou Alcindor in the interior and the 32-year-old Oscar orchestrating from the perimeter was a tandem that was ready to dominate the basketball world, and that's exactly what they did. At one point, the Bucks won 20 straight games, which was an NBA record at the time. They finished the regular season with a 66-16 record, while bolstering the league's best offense and the best defense. Although Oscar's numbers had significantly dipped now that he was sharing the floor with Alcindor, it was a sacrifice he was more than happy to make in order to win, and they kept doing that into the postseason. They crushed the Warriors in 5 games, crushed the Lakers in 5 games, and then swept the Baltimore Bullets in the NBA Finals, with Oscar putting up 23, 9, and 5 on 52% shooting. He had finally won that elusive championship, cementing his already impressive NBA legacy. Looking at the totality of his career, he made 11 All-NBA teams, he was a 12-time All-Star, and he was the 1964 League MVP. When it comes to the respect he gets among his contemporaries, it was basically as high as it gets. But amongst the community of NBA fans, he's not quite appreciated to the same extent, and that's a tragedy. He might not have the flashiest game, he might not be dunking from the free throw line, but at the end of the day, he got it done.
Dirk, battles. That's the first thing that come to my mind. Playing each other twice in the NBA championship. You're going to walk away with some scars. You're going to walk away with a healthy version of dislike and a healthy version of how much you respect and how much love that you can have for a competitor. I love Dirk as a career he had, and a career that is a legendary career that a lot of people still, once again, don't talk about. And just to be able to compete against him and win a championship in 06, that really solidified like my career and my talents. And then to watch him come back and win his in 2011, even though it hurt us as a team, as a fan of the game, I can appreciate what that did for the game of basketball and what that did for one of the game's greatest players.
One of the most incredible comebacks in NBA Finals history.
That one championship was enough. He'll need to win 3, 4, 5. That one for him.
Every once in a while, a player sticks around for so long that people lose track of how lethal he was in his prime. There are many examples of players who fit that description, like Vince Carter and Dwight Howard. But my favorite example of that is none other than Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk was a 7-foot power forward/center who played 21 years of his career faithfully for the Mavericks. He was also a 14-time All-Star and made 12 All-NBA teams. He's currently 6th on the all-time scoring list with 31,560 points. Everybody knows that Dirk is an all-timer and a future Hall of Famer, but the area I want to focus on in this video is the prime of his career, because Dirk was truly something else during that time, and people are either too quick to forget or too young to fully understand his impact during that time. So let's evaluate his greatness by taking it back to the beginning of his career up through his prime days. Dirk was drafted in 1998 with the 9th overall pick by the Milwaukee Bucks, before they ended up trading him to the Dallas Mavericks for the big man, Robert Tractor Traylor, in what was possibly the most regrettable decision in Bucks history. But it didn't look that way initially, since Dirk's career got off to a very slow start. The 98-99 season was a lockout-shortened year that only had 50 regular season games. Dirk was only 20 years old and was having a difficult time adjusting to the style of American basketball. A skinny, lengthy perimeter big man wasn't something that was common in the late 90s, and the physicality was taking its toll on him. Fans were even sarcastically calling him Dirk Nowitzki due to the lack of D in his game. In only 20 minutes a game, Dirk averaged 8.2 points and 3.4 rebounds on just 40% shooting. It was also a very forgettable season for the Mavericks as a whole, as the team missed the playoffs and finished with a 19-31 record. It was so difficult on Dirk that he even said he considered leaving the NBA and heading back to Germany to play out his basketball career over there. Fortunately for us all, he didn't end up doing that. Several changes were made for his sophomore season. For one, Mark Cuban purchased the team. Dirk credited Cuban for changing the team's atmosphere into a winning culture. Under Don Nelson's coaching, and with another year of development, Nowitzki significantly improved his play and all of his numbers, averaging 17.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists on 46% shooting, which was good enough to finish as the runner-up for the Most Improved Player award. They didn't make the playoffs this season either, but the following year is when their winning days would begin. From the 2001 to 2010-2011 season, the Mavericks had over 50 wins each year with Dirk leading the way. Over this 10-year stretch, he averaged 24.3 points, 8.8 rebounds, and 2.8 assists on 48% shooting, 38.5% from 3, and 88% from the free throw line. This is a point I want to take a moment to emphasize, is this man's uniqueness and efficiency. During this era of basketball, the game was dominated by bruising, back-to-the-basket big men like Shaquille O'Neal, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Chris Webber, and Amari Stoudemire. And then there was Dirk Nowitzki, who dominated with finesse, fadeaways, and efficient shooting from distance. During Dirk's prime, the league was shooting less than half the amount of three-pointers they're shooting today, and yet still he stood out in that era with that style. The truth is, the man was so ahead of his time that he shouldn't have been as good as he was, given the era he played in. A player like Dirk Nowitzki is made for today's game, and there's no question in my mind that he would have an absolute feast in this current era. Speaking of efficiency, his most efficient season of his career was the 2006-2007 season, where he averaged 24.6 points, 8.9 rebounds, and 3.4 assists on 50.2% from the field, 41.6% from 3, and 90.4% from the free throw line. That's a historic 50-40-90 season. When you factor in his size, his sharpshooting abilities, and his signature fadeaway, you can begin to see how a prime Dirk Nowitzki was one of the most indefensible players of all time. There were so many occasions where he was going to score, and there was absolutely nothing the defender could do about it. It was that 50-40-90 season where his Mavericks won a franchise record 67 games, and he was named the league's MVP. Now this is where some of Dirk's prime years get a little bit tricky. As we mentioned, the Mavericks won a lot of games during that era, and were often going to the Western Conference playoffs as a high-seeded team. Yet despite that, the Mavericks often came up short in the playoffs. An often forgotten aspect of Dirk's legacy is that before the 2011 NBA Finals, the NBA community by and large viewed Dirk as a player who was an underperformer in the postseason. Some would even go as far as saying he was a choker. I don't think I would go that far, but there is some merit to it. In the 2006 NBA Finals, the Mavericks had a 2-0 lead in the series over the Miami Heat and then lost the next 4 straight. Some people believe that had more to do with the refs than Dirk and the Mavericks, but I digress. In the following year, Dirk's MVP season, where they won 67 games, they were upset in the first round by a seemingly less talented Golden State Warriors team. This was an MVP-led Dallas Mavericks team that had just won a franchise record 67 games and was the top seed in the conference, losing in the first round to an 8th-seeded team in 6 games. And then, in the next 3 years after that, his Mavericks lost in the first or second round, despite being a 50-plus win team each year. These were significantly huge blows to the legacy of Dirk Nowitzki, but we all know how he redeemed himself. The famous 2011 NBA Finals, where Dirk's Mavericks upset the super team Miami Heat of LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. I don't think there was ever a time in NBA history where one series mattered more to one player's legacy than the 2011 Finals mattered to Dirk's legacy. He showed up big, dropped his 26 points per game and 9.7 rebounds per game while securing the Finals MVP. But if he hadn't pulled that off, well then people would still remember him as a great player who couldn't get it done in the postseason. Fortunately, he did win in the Finals and his legacy was saved. With all of this being said, I personally think it's pretty remarkable that he even won a championship. Just about the entirety of his career, he was lacking superstar help. He had Steve Nash early in his career, but at that point, Nash was not the player he would be in Phoenix. Who else did he have? Michael Finley? Jason Terry? Tyson Chandler? Josh Howard? An old Jason Kidd? He was basically never a part of a trio or even a duo that you would expect to win championships. If you think about many of the great players who played in that era, many of them were much more fortunate with the co-stars they got to play with. Kobe had said that for the longest time he had tried to recruit Dirk to play with him on the Lakers. Imagine if that had happened. How much winning do you think Dirk would have done then? But Dirk had always turned him down, because he never wanted to leave his Mavericks. And honestly, that's what makes Dirk so special. He could have won more elsewhere, he could have been a part of a super team, but instead he was loyal and played 21 years for the same franchise, which is the most seasons in NBA history for a player to play with only one team. He wasn't the quickest, he wasn't the strongest, and he wasn't the greatest defensive player. But the truth is, Dirk was a loyal legend who wasn't expected to win a championship, and given his circumstances, he probably shouldn't have, but he did. And that's much more than many legends can say. He wasn't the greatest ever at his position, he wasn't an all-time great two-way player, but he was an all-time great from an efficiency standpoint, and he was one of the hardest players to guard the NBA has ever seen. He was also one of a kind, and he did it his way. I said it once and I'll say it again. The way he played his game, there is absolutely zero question in my mind that he would torch today's league.
What makes a player legendary isn't always about stats or individual hardware. Sometimes it's just about the following they build amongst us hardcore basketball fans. Today, we're counting down the top 10 cult classic NBA players of all time. You know the type. The guys who, for one reason or another, captured our hearts and imaginations in a way that often felt bigger than their actual stats. These are the players who, despite maybe not being on an all-star team every year, or carrying their teams to multiple titles as the main guy, carved out a special place in our memories. Think of it like this. A cult classic film isn't the biggest blockbuster hit, but it's the movie you and your friends have watched 20 times and quoted endlessly. So in basketball terms, these are players whose popularity goes way beyond their box score. Whether they built fan bases through their personality, style, or even just one unforgettable moment. These are the guys that fans love, sometimes irrationally. They might not be Hall of Famers, but they're legends in our hearts. And just to be clear, this is a very personal and subjective list by nature. I expect everyone to have a list completely different from mine. So please, let me know in the comments section below who are some of your favorite cult classic players. Without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10, Mark Madsen. Now Mark Madsen might not be the first name that pops into your head when you think of NBA legends, and that's exactly why he's perfect for this list. This guy was the definition of a blue-collar player. Madsen wasn't flashy, he wasn't dominant, and he wasn't even a starter. But what he did bring to the table was relentlessness. Every minute Madsen was on the court, he gave everything. He was that guy hustling for a rebound, setting screens, and celebrating like he just hit a game winner. even if he only played 2 minutes. Us Laker fans adored him for his hustle. His nickname Mad Dog fit his energy perfectly. He was a back-to-back NBA champion with the Lakers in 2001 and 2002. And for anybody who was a fan of the Lakers in the early 2000s, it is impossible for us to forget his iconic corny dancing celebration during the NBA championship parade that perfectly sums up why we loved this cornball so much. Madsen might have averaged just 2.2 points per game in his career, but he was the kind of blue-collar player that teammates respected and fans never forgot. Number 9. Yao Ming. Yao Ming wasn't just a basketball player, but he was a cultural phenomenon. Standing at a massive 7 foot 6 inches tall, his arrival in the NBA as the first international player selected with a top pick in the draft was a monumental event. He carried the hopes and dreams of an entire nation on his broad shoulders, and he delivered in a big way, both on and off the court. Now you might think, Yao Ming, a cult classic? And yes, he was a star. But Yao's impact wasn't just on the NBA level, it was worldwide. The guy was selected to the All-Star game every year of his career, including his last year where he played in only 5 games. And that was because of how adored he was in his homeland of China and around the world. He was the bridge between the NBA and Asia. Yao made the Rockets a global brand. His combination of skill, size, and humility created one of the most devoted fan bases that basketball has ever seen. Even though injuries shortened his career, Yao became a Hall of Famer, a 3-time Olympian, and let's not forget his role as China's flag bearer in those 3 Olympic Games. Yao now serves as the president of the Chinese Basketball Association, where he started his own basketball journey. His cult status didn't fade with time, it grew. Number 8. Alex Caruso. Alex Caruso doesn't look like your typical NBA player. In fact, some people joked he looked more like Ernie Johnson's son than a true hooper. But then, he'll pull off a chase down block or just dunk on someone's head. That mix of unassuming looks, elite defense, and never back down attitude made Caruso a legend in LA, at every stop he's had in his career since. Caruso is the embodiment of hustle. You watch him play, and it's like he's got an extra gear that nobody else has. He's diving for loose balls, taking charges, and just relentlessly hounding opponents on defense. Speaking of defense, many consider him one of the best defensive guards in the NBA right now. He's smart, he anticipates plays, and he's not afraid to get physical. That kind of effort and commitment is something fans truly appreciate. His contributions to the Los Angeles Lakers championship run in 2020 are undeniable. He wasn't the superstar, but he was an essential piece of that puzzle, providing crucial defense and smart decision-making in key moments. And it's not just the title. His consistent defensive excellence has earned him several all-defensive team selections, solidifying his impact on winning. Caruso is the perfect example of effort and hustle earning respect. He's the kind of player every team wishes they had, the ultimate glue guy who makes everyone around him better. Number 7. Boban Marjanovic. At 7'4", Boban is obviously one of the tallest players in NBA history. But what made Boban special wasn't just his size, but it was his gentle soul. He's widely known as one of the kindest, most likable players the league has ever seen. Anytime Boban checked into a game for his team, the crowd exploded. He wasn't out there often, but when he played, he made an impact. Whether it was grabbing rebounds, scoring with a soft touch, or lighting up the arena with his smile. Even though he hasn't been a consistent starter throughout his career, Boban's limited but memorable on-court appearances have only added to his mystique. Every dunk and every hook shot feels special because of his sheer size. His off-court ventures have further cemented his cult following, from hilarious TV commercials to his unforgettable role in the movie John Wick 3. Boban has transcended the basketball world and become a recognizable figure within pop culture itself. Number 6. Chris Birdman Anderson. Chris Anderson didn't just play basketball, he attacked it with energy, emotion, and enough tattoos to fill up an art gallery. Birdman went from being the first D-League call-up in history to becoming a key defensive piece for the Big Three Miami Heat. In 2013, he shot 80.7% in the playoffs and helped Miami win the title. But stats were never the whole story with Birdman. His cult classic status extends beyond his impressive stats and championship ring. His unique tattoos, colorful hairstyles, and eccentric personality made him a recognizable figure in pop culture. He wasn't afraid to be himself, and that almost always resonated with the fans. His high-energy playing style was infectious, and his passion for the game was clear every time he stepped on the court. The Birdman was a true original, and his unique character made him a beloved figure in the NBA. Number 5. Vinnie Johnson. When the Pistons needed a bucket fast, they turned to Vinnie Johnson, the man called the microwave because he could heat up in a hurry. He wasn't a starter, he wasn't flashy, but he was clutch. In fact, it was Johnson who hit the game-winning shot to clinch Detroit's second straight title in 1990. That moment sealed his place in NBA history, and in the minds of every bad boy Pistons fan at the time. For a guy who came off the bench, Johnson made his minutes count, putting up double figures for 7 seasons straight in Detroit. One of the most underrated aspects of Johnson's game was his incredible durability. He played all 82 games 7 times for the Pistons. In his other 2 full seasons in Detroit, he played 79 and 78 games, meaning he missed a grand total of just 7 games during 9 full seasons with the Pistons. That kind of reliability coming off the bench is invaluable, and will always be endearing to the fans. Number 4. Jason Williams. White Chocolate was a walking highlight reel. Elbow passes, no-look dimes, and crossovers that made defenders dizzy. He wasn't an all-star, he wasn't even a consistent starter late in his career, but when it comes to how he's remembered, none of that truly mattered. He made basketball fun. Williams had instant stardom as soon as he entered the NBA, as his debut perfectly coincided with the cultural shift in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. His highlight plays were all over SportsCenter, and he was a regular in Slam magazine at the same time that Eminem's Slim Shady LP was blowing up. He was one of the few who represented the and one influence on basketball culture, bringing that flashy streetball style to a wider audience. Jason Williams' NBA legacy isn't defined by dominant scoring or all-star appearances. Instead, it's built on his electrifying, unconventional, and downright dazzling playmaking. He was a guaranteed highlight every night, a point guard who played with a flair and swagger that was unlike anyone else in the league. Number 3. Derek Fisher. Derek Fisher might not have been the flashiest or most statistically dominant player, but his NBA legacy is undeniable. One of the things that's fascinating about Fisher is a recent analysis that came out that actually recognizes Fish as the player with the most teammate star power in NBA history. Think about that for a second. Throughout his 18-year NBA career, Fisher played alongside of 5 teammates who each finished in the top 10 of MVP voting. We're talking about absolute legends of the game, like Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, who both finished in the top 10 of MVP voting 8 times during Fisher's tenure. He also shared the court with the younger Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. That's an unbelievable amount of high-level talent to play alongside. Playing with all those all-time greats gave Fisher the opportunity to be a part of some of the most iconic moments of all time. And while he certainly benefited from having talent around him, it would be a mistake to overlook his own contributions to those championship teams. Fisher was a tough, smart, and incredibly clutch player. He wasn't afraid of the big moment, and he often delivered when the pressure was at its highest. Whether it was with clutch 3-pointers, or he was taking a pivotal charge just when his squad needed to swing the momentum. And if you know NBA history, then of course you know this shot. Game 5, 2004 Western Conference Semifinals. 0.4 seconds on the clock. Fisher catches, turns, fires, and that's all she wrote. It was one of the most jaw-dropping game winners ever, and one of the greatest in Laker history. His consistency and reliability made him a favorite among Laker fans. We knew that even if he wasn't going to drop 30 points, he was going to give us everything he had and be ready to hit a big shot if needed. Number 2. Jeremy Lin. For a brief but unforgettable stretch in February of 2012, Jeremy Lin wasn't just a basketball player, he was a cultural phenomenon, a folk hero in the eyes of millions. The story of Linsanity is one of perseverance, opportunity, and a lightning-in-the-bottle moment that took the NBA by storm. Think about the context. The New York Knicks were struggling, having lost 11 of their previous 13 games. Jeremy Lin was an undrafted guard, a virtual unknown who had been sleeping on his brother's couch. His agent had even told him before the game on February 4th, 2012, that if he didn't play well that night, it would likely be his last game in the NBA. Talk about pressure. But then, something incredible happened. Lin came off the bench that night and exploded for 25 points and 7 assists in a much-needed win. And that was just the beginning. 2 nights later, he dropped 28 points and 8 assists against the Utah Jazz. The defining moment, though, came in a matchup against Kobe Bryant and the Los Angeles Lakers at Madison Square Garden. Lin put on an absolute clinic, scoring 38 points, including a dagger three-pointer right in front of the Lakers bench. But the magic wasn't over yet. On Valentine's Day against the Toronto Raptors, with the score tied and the clock winding down, Lin waved off a screen and calmly drilled a game-winning three-pointer at the buzzer. In his first 5 career starts, this sensation from Harvard scored a staggering 136 points, the most by any player since the NBA/ABA merger. He went on to lead the Knicks to 10 wins in 13 games, completely turning around what looked like another lost season in the mecca of basketball. Suddenly, Jeremy Lin went from sleeping on couches and being mistaken for a team trainer to landing on back-to-back Sports Illustrated covers and being named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world. The first American-born NBA player of Chinese or Taiwanese descent had an unprecedented run for an undrafted guard playing in the league's biggest market. Before we get to number 1, here's my incredibly long list of honorable mentions. Let me know below which one of these guys should have been in the list instead. Number 1, the GOAT himself, Brian Scalabrine. At the top of the list is the king of cult legends. For a certain generation of NBA fans, the White Mamba became something far, far more than just the role player that he was in reality. He became a legend, an almost mythical figure whose impact went so far beyond the box score and entered the realm of pure internet folklore. Scalabrine was never a prolific scorer. In his 11-year NBA career, he never averaged more than 6.5 points per game in a single season. By all traditional metrics, he was a career role player who spent a lot of time watching from the sidelines. But that's precisely where the magic of Scalabrine lies. He became the NBA's equivalent of Chuck Norris, the subject of countless over-the-top, hilariously dramatic online posts and memes. You see lines like, quote, "In a league that has seen legends take the court such as Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson, there is perhaps no greater icon in NBA history than Brian Scalabrine." The absurdity was the point, and fans couldn't get enough of it in the 2010s. The White Mamba nickname bestowed on him by the passionate Boston Celtic faithful was a testament to how beloved he became despite his limited playing time. It was ironic, for sure, playing off of Kobe Bryant's legendary Black Mamba moniker, but it was also coming from a place of love from the Boston faithful. Celtics fans appreciated his hustle, his team-first attitude, and the fact that he seemed to genuinely enjoy being a part of the team. While Brian Scalabrine might have been the ultimate ironic superstar, the love and admiration he received from the fans was very real. He became a symbol of the hardworking, team-first player who finds a way to contribute and connect with the fan base, even without the gaudy statistics. So there you have it, 10 players who may not be remembered as all-time greats, but they'll always be remembered by their fans.
I love Shaq, but I'm disappointed in his career because I think he left a lot out. He didn't take it serious enough. He didn't get himself in the best physical condition that he needed to be in year and year out. He was a 52% free throw shooter. Mm-hmm. He missed probably 100 games due to various injuries.
He did.
A lot because of his weight.
You're correct.
I believe he should have had at least 2 MVPs. I believe he should have had another 1 or 2 NBA Finals. And when he retired, he should have been the 3rd all-time leading scorer in history, behind Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Karl Malone. But he underachieved.
Who would Shaq be if he had your work ethic?
He'd be the greatest of all time. Yeah, I wish he was in it, John. Would have had 12 rings.
So you hear it over and over again, even from people who really know their stuff. The narrative that Shaquille O'Neal didn't live up to his potential. He didn't work as hard as he could have, that he left a lot on the table, and that his longevity doesn't stack up to many of the greatest players of all time. But is this actually the case? I mean, sure, of course there's some truth to a certain extent. Even Shaq admitted in his conversation with Kobe Bryant that he didn't always treat his fitness as a priority. And then, when it came to his free throws, Shaq did refuse to try Rick Barry's free throw form, simply because he was a prideful guy who thought it looked stupid. But with that being said, was his conditioning and longevity really as bad as people make it seem? Honestly, I'm not so sure. And today, I'm pushing back a bit on this widespread narrative about Shaq. Now first off, you guys know I love Kobe, and he's my favorite player ever, and I treat most of his comments as if they came from a wise sage of basketball wisdom. But not everything the guy said was complete gospel. For example, he said in this interview that he would have won 12 rings if Shaq had his work ethic. And what's funny is that no one ever mentions that Kobe and Shaq only played 8 seasons together. So unless Kobe's work ethic was so good that he could somehow win 2 championships in only 1 season, this comment is basically total cap from Kobe. Now Shaq entered the NBA at the age of 20, and he was immediately a force, as he won the Rookie of the Year award in his debut season. Then, in only his sophomore season as a 21-year-old, he was averaging 29 points, 13 rebounds, and 3 blocks on 60% shooting. In only his second year, he was already 2nd in scoring, 2nd in rebounding, and 1st in field goal percentage. Shaq was an MVP finalist in his first couple of seasons, and then in his 13th season in the NBA as a member of the Miami Heat, he was 2nd in MVP voting, behind only Steve Nash. For some perspective, in Michael Jordan's 13th season, he was retiring from the Chicago Bulls and was about to become a Washington Wizard. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were retired before they even reached their 14th season, and once Tim Duncan reached his 13th season in the NBA, he would never again be a top 5 finalist in the MVP voting. Shaq was arguably the best center in the NBA for nearly a decade and a half. Yet by the way people talk about him, you get the impression that he only dominated the league for 5 seasons. Sure, he could have lasted longer and achieved more if he had Kobe's work ethic. Of course. But isn't that true of all of us? Who would you be if you had Kobe's work ethic? Who would I be? Who would Hakeem Olajuwon be? Who would Giannis be? Who would Luka be? Basically, no other player in NBA history has ever had quite the insane and maniacal work ethic that Kobe had. So naturally, this what if could apply to just about anyone. But for some reason, we only hold Shaq to this monumental standard, even though he was dominant for nearly a decade and a half straight. Now some of you might say, we're not just talking about Shaq being great, we're talking about his peak. Alright, if that's the case, let's look at it from that perspective. Shaq's absolute peak as a basketball player was the 1999 to 2000 season, where he averaged roughly 30 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 blocks, on his way to his near-unanimous MVP season. This was after Shaq had put on a significant amount of weight and muscle. So sure, he was a physical specimen. But compared to his thinner and quicker sophomore season in Orlando, it's not like the production was all that different. But for the sake of the argument, even if Shaq's greatest individual season was so far ahead of any other seasons he's ever had, is it really fair to hold him to that standard when we often don't hold other all-time greats to that same standard? For example, Steph Curry's unanimous MVP season in 2016 is so far above and beyond any other season he's ever produced. And yet, we don't punish him for failing to maintain that same level of dominance year in and year out. Wilt Chamberlain is famous for averaging over 50 points in a single season, but he only averaged over 40 points in 2 seasons of his career. So why don't we punish him in the same way that we do for Shaq, for failing to maintain his peak? Now I get it. Some of this bad PR Shaq brought upon himself by coming into training camp fat on multiple occasions, and by admitting that he often relied on Kobe to carry the team in the earlier parts of the season. But again, we're talking about a man who finished as the 9th highest scorer in NBA history, who led his team to the NBA Finals 13 seasons apart, who was a 15-time All-Star, a 14-time All-NBA player, and a guy who was a legitimate MVP candidate for 13 straight seasons. They say with great power comes great responsibility, and we all know that Shaq had plenty of power. And yes, when he was on the court during his prime, he was in fact Superman. But is it possible that we're holding him to a standard that was even too high for Superman to reach? For goodness sake, every time I hear someone take a dump on his longevity, even though he was an NBA candidate for nearly a decade and a half straight, I want to ask them what they wanted from him instead. Was he supposed to be an MVP caliber player for 17 or 18 seasons straight? How many players have actually done that? Spoiler alert, you can count them on one hand. At the end of the day, Shaq could have got more out of his career if he had an obsessive work ethic. But at the same time, there's no question in my mind that this narrative has become vastly overblown, to the point that the criticism has become silly and unreasonable, especially when people dare to call him a disappointment. There's a lot of things that Shaq's NBA career was, and disappointing is definitely not one of them. So recently, I saw this post on X and it made me facepalm big time. The topic of the most influential players in NBA history is a pretty frequent discussion, especially on social media. And what's annoying about posts like this is it literally says in the post the most influential players ever, while only having guys represented who played during their lifetime. The truth is, when you're really looking at who were the most influential players in NBA history, there's a lot more that gets factored in than simply how cool the player was, how good the player was, or how many people look up to him. Today, I'm bringing you my list of the top 5 most influential players in NBA history. And honestly, I thought about making this a top 10 list, that way I can include more players. But part of me feels like the reason this is such a spicy topic is because we usually only limit it to 4 or 5 players. So it really starts to get tough to narrow it down and decide who gets left off. So please, let me know in the comments section below how your list differs from mine. First off, at number 5, I've got Allen Iverson. Anyone who lived in Philly during the rise of Allen Iverson can tell you all about this guy's influence, as he brought hip-hop culture to the NBA. He was so authentic, real, and genuinely himself that he was constantly getting fined by the NBA for how he presented himself. For example, this guy put pressure on the NBA to loosen up their dress code. And as you all have noticed, in the years since, the NBA has become extremely loose, as players are now allowed to express themselves wearing just about whatever they want. On some occasions, they look fantastic, and on others, not so much. Allen Iverson was an incredible talent, and the way he played the game with swagger, with style, and with supreme confidence, he inspired a new generation of basketball fans, ones that could relate to an undersized underdog, as AI was on many occasions. Some are going to say that he doesn't deserve to be on the list, and some are going to get mad at me saying that he isn't high enough. But for myself personally, he'll have to settle for the 5th spot on this list. Number 4, Steph Curry. He is quite simply the greatest shooter in NBA history, as he is the league's all-time leader in three-pointers made, and by quite a margin. He literally changed the way the game is played. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area during the rise of Steph Curry, and let me tell you, just from playing pickup ball in 24-hour fitness, I could see the influence of Steph Curry, as guys were pulling up from 30 feet out with extreme regularity when they had no business doing so. The NBA itself became a three-point shooting league because of his impact, as everyone wanted to emulate the Warriors' success. Nowadays, kids and even prospects around the world are focusing on their three-point shooting because everyone wants to play the game like Steph. And for goodness sake, the Golden State Warriors became the most valuable franchise in all of sports, mainly due to Steph Curry's greatness. If you had told me in the early 2000s that the Warriors would go on to be the most valuable franchise in sports during my lifetime, I would have told you that you were crazy. But again, we have Steph Curry to thank for that. Number 3, Oscar Robertson. Some of you are going to hear that name and are going to scratch your head. But before you roast me in the comments section, you need to understand, this guy had one of the biggest impacts in the history of the NBA. It was Oscar Robertson himself who took the NBA to court and challenged the league over its lack of player mobility. There's a cool story here, and honestly, I'll probably do an exclusive video for it at some point. But what you need to know is that NBA free agency didn't exist before Oscar Robertson. And if it wasn't for him stepping in, free agency might not exist in the NBA. And especially when you look at this current era of basketball players, where guys are teaming up, pairing up with their friends, and making super teams left and right, you have to go all the way back to the early 1970s in order to understand how that all was possible. Then after that, this guy was Mr. Triple-Double, as he was the first player in NBA history to average a triple-double over the course of the season. Beyond that, he helped Kareem Abdul-Jabbar win his first NBA championship in 1971. So yeah, beyond the fact that he's the reason for free agency, he was a pretty darn good player as well. At the number 2 spot, I have Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And I know, some of you are going to be annoyed that I put Magic and Bird in the second spot. So technically, this would be the top 6 most influential players in NBA history. The thing is, I think the impact of these two guys is completely inseparable. Magic Johnson is not as special as he was without Bird, and Bird is not as special as he was without Magic. Their rivalry defined an entire era of NBA basketball, and ever since then, the NBA has been looking to replicate that rivalry. It also happened for the two greatest franchises in the history of the sport, greatly enhancing their value and their legacies. To this day, we are always referring to fast break highlights as Showtime, and that is thanks in large part to the Showtime Lakers. The rivalry between these two inspired countless plays, documentaries, films, and TV shows, and we are far from done seeing stories written about them. But beyond all of that, the greatest impact that these two guys had was the fact that they saved the NBA from extinction. Because the truth was, the late 1970s saw some of the worst basketball ratings of all time. As the fandom was divided, drug abuse and violence were rampant throughout the league, NBA games themselves were on tape delay until Magic and Bird took off in the NBA, and they were in desperate need of a savior or two when Magic and Bird showed up. So it's not an exaggeration to say that these two guys literally saved the NBA. And if they never happened, there's a good chance that we don't have a National Basketball Association to enjoy in this modern day. Number 1 comes as no surprise. It's Michael Jordan. It's one thing for Magic and Bird to save the league, but as they were making their exit, there was Michael to take the torch. And not only did he carry the NBA forward, but he took it to heights that the game had never seen before. Through Michael Jordan's influence, and by being the face of the Dream Team, he made the NBA global, as massive crowds throughout various different countries were all flocking en masse to see Michael Jordan play. To this day, the NBA ratings in the finals were the highest of all time when Michael Jordan was playing. But after that, he inspired many of the greatest players who came after him, as they looked to replicate his timeless skills. He also has the greatest selling basketball shoe of all time, and even several decades after he's played his last game in the NBA, they continue to fly off the shelves. I could see an argument for Magic or Bird at the number 1 spot, since they quite literally kept the NBA afloat. But no one, absolutely no one has ever had a greater impact on basketball's popularity than Michael Jordan did. So that was just my list of the top 5 most influential players in NBA history, and this is my honorable mentions list. And some of these were really difficult to leave off my list. So let me know in the comment section below, which one of these honorable mentions would you put in the top 5? And if you did that, which one would you take out? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. Right now, we are in the midst of one of the all-time great MVP races, which led one of my dedicated viewers to ask the question, what are the top 10 MVP races in NBA history? Now, when I'm looking at this list, I'm not just breaking it down by how close the races actually were, but what also matters to me is the depth of the race. Sure, if 2 players are having all-time great historic seasons, then that is going to be impressive and carry some weight. But in the instances where there were 5 or 6 guys that you legitimately could have given the award to, well then that's going to carry some weight as well. But as always, these are just my choices as the top 10 MVP races in NBA history. So if your opinion differs from mine, please let me know in the comment section below. But without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10, the 2008 MVP race. You guys all remember this one very well. It was the epic battle between Kobe Bryant and Chris Paul. Kobe ended up winning this award, and it was his first and only MVP of his career. I think the big separating factor was the fact that the Lakers had the best record in the Western Conference at 57-25. On the year, Kobe averaged about 28 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and nearly 2 steals. You compare that to Chris Paul, who was averaging 21 points, 4 rebounds, nearly 12 assists, and 3 steals. It was mostly a 2-man race, and we knew that one of these 2 players were going to win the award. With that being said, Kevin Garnett did put up a decent effort, as he averaged roughly 19 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists while being the Defensive Player of the Year in his first season with Boston. And then LeBron James came in 4th, as he averaged 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists, while hitting 48% of his shots. This was definitely one of the closer races and a good way to start off this list. Number 9, the 1975 MVP race. This one certainly had the depth, as it was rich with a lot of Hall of Famers in their prime. The winner of the award was the 23-year-old underrated legend Bob McAdoo, who put up averages of 34.5 points, 14 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 blocks on 51% shooting. Just a little bit behind him was Dave Cowens of the Boston Celtics, who averaged about 20, 14, and 5 on 47% shooting. Then you had Elvin Hayes of the Washington Bullets, who averaged 23, 12, and 2 blocks on 44% shooting. Then at 4th, you had Rick Barry, who averaged about 31 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists, while being the Warriors' go-to superstar. And then at number 5, you had the best overall player of the 1970s, which was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who averaged 30 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 blocks. Statistically, he was an absolute monster, but the biggest reason he finished only 5th was the fact that his Milwaukee Bucks finished the regular season with a 38-44 record. Then at number 6, you had Nate Tiny Archibald, who averaged about 26 points and 7 assists on 46% shooting. Without question, this was one of the deepest MVP races in NBA history, as 5 players finished with double-digit first-place votes. Number 8, the 1993 MVP race. During this season, 3 of the greatest players of all time were all conveniently having the prime of their careers simultaneously. The first was Charles Barkley, who enjoyed winning his first and only MVP award of his career. And as a member of the Phoenix Suns, he averaged about 26 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, and nearly 2 steals on 52% shooting. The runner-up was Akeem Olajuwon, who had an utterly monstrous season of 26 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 blocks on 53% shooting. Voter fatigue may or may not have played a factor, because finishing 3rd was Michael Jeffrey Jordan, who also had a dominant performance, averaging 33 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals on 49.5% shooting. Charles Barkley and the Phoenix Suns were certainly the most interesting and newest story, as the acquisition of Barkley helped charge them to a 62-20 record, which ended up being the best record in the NBA. And as usual with the MVP award, they like to give it to the guys that are winning. Number 7, the 1963 MVP race. At this time in history, the MVP award winner was decided by the players and not the media, which some may argue is a better or worse system, but regardless of that fact, there is no question that this was one of the deepest and most impressive MVP races of all time. The player who won the award was Bill Russell, as he was honored for his team play, for his leadership, and for the ways he contributed towards winning. On the year, he averaged about 17 points, 23 rebounds, and 4 assists on 43% shooting. But the rest of the list is utterly jaw-dropping as well, because the runner-up for the award was the great Elgin Baylor, who averaged 34 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 assists. Then you had Oscar Robertson, who nearly had his second straight season averaging a triple-double, as he put up about 28 points, 10 rebounds, and 9.5 assists. Then in fourth place was Bob Pettit, averaging 28 points, 15 rebounds, and 3 assists. Then Jerry West came in fifth, who only got 2 first-place votes, yet averaged 27 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists. All the way down in the 7th spot is the amazing Wilt Chamberlain, who on the year averaged 45 points, 24 rebounds, and 3 assists, and he also had by far the most win shares on the season. He didn't earn a single first-place vote, and this mostly had to do with the fact that the Warriors only had a 31-49 regular season. And at the time, there was a narrative that Wilt was a bit of a selfish player who cared more about scoring than winning. And because of this, he didn't get more love from his peers in the MVP voting. Regardless, it's mind-blowing that someone could put up these numbers and finish only 7th in the MVP race. But truly, that just speaks to the quality of this group. Number 6 is the 2024 MVP race. I know this just recently happened, so to some people it might seem like recency bias, but the truth is, this was one of the deepest and most competitive MVP races that we've ever seen in this league. The winner was Nikola Jokic, as he averaged about 26 points, 12 rebounds, and 9 assists, while hitting a ridiculous 58% of his shots, and while dominating the NBA in basically every advanced stat. Second place was the young SGA, who averaged 30 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2 steals, while being extremely efficient for a guard, as he led his Oklahoma City Thunder to a surprising first seed in the Western Conference. And third place was Luka Doncic, who averaged a monstrous 34 points, 9 rebounds, and 10 assists, while hitting nearly 49% of his shots. And fourth place was Giannis, who only secured 1 first-place vote, despite averaging 30 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1 steal, while hitting a ridiculous 61% of his shots. And a complete afterthought was Jalen Brunson, who averaged 29 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists, while leading his New York Knicks to the best season they've had in over a decade. When a couple decades pass, I think we'll fondly look back on this race as one of the deepest ones that we've ever seen. Number 5, the 1987 MVP race. If we're being honest, this was only a 3-man race between 3 of the top 10 greatest players in NBA history. Winning the award was Magic Johnson, who was leading the Showtime Lakers while they were at their very best. On the year, he averaged 24 points, 6 rebounds, 12 assists, and nearly 2 steals, while hitting 52% of his shots. His Lakers also had the best record in the NBA at 65-17. With that being said, some might think that he actually stole the award from Michael Jordan, who finished second, because on the year, MJ averaged 37 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 1.5 blocks on 48% shooting, in what was easily one of the most impressive two-way seasons that we've ever seen from a perimeter player. Finishing third with only 1 first-place vote was Larry Bird, who averaged 28 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals, while having 50, 40, 90 percentages on the season, as he led his Boston Celtics to the best record in the Eastern Conference. Imagine averaging nearly a 30-point triple-double season where you hit 50, 40, 90 percentages and lead your team to the best record in the conference in what was the stronger conference at the time, and you only finish with one first-place MVP vote. If that doesn't tell you just how competitive this three-man race was, then I don't think anything will. Number 4, the 1990 MVP race. This one was absurdly close in what was a three-man dogfight. The guy who won the award was Magic Johnson of the Showtime Lakers, who on the year averaged 22 points, 7 rebounds, 11.5 assists, and nearly 2 steals, on 48% shooting. What's crazy is that Magic won the award while having far fewer first-place votes than the guy in second place, and that was because overall he had the highest ranking on average. The guy who finished in second was the 26-year-old Charles Barkley of the Philadelphia 76ers, who averaged 25 points, 11.5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals, while hitting a ridiculous 60% of his shots. In third place was Michael Jordan, who averaged nearly 34 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 3 steals, while hitting 52.6% of his attempts. Honestly, in this highly competitive race, I think you could have given this award to any one of these 3 players, and the vast majority of the basketball community wouldn't have a problem with it. Number 3, the 2003 MVP race. When you look at the final tally, this was mostly a two-man race between Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. But the reality is, there was about 7 players who legitimately could have been given the award based on how they performed that season. As I mentioned, Tim Duncan was the winner, as he led his San Antonio Spurs to finish with a 60-22 regular season. And on the year, he averaged 23 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 blocks, as he was an absolute monster on both ends of the court. Kevin Garnett of the Minnesota Timberwolves finished second, averaging 23, 13, and 6. Kobe Bryant had one of the best seasons of his entire career, as the 24-year-old finished third in the MVP voting and ahead of his teammate Shaq, as he had averages of 30 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2 steals on 45% shooting. Tracy McGrady finished in fourth. His Orlando Magic didn't have a very great season in the standings, but he was that season's leading scorer, averaging 32 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 5 assists. Fifth was Shaq with his usual dominant season, averaging 27, 11, and 3. In sixth place was Allen Iverson, putting up his usual AI numbers. And all the way down in seventh was Dirk Nowitzki. Imagine putting up these numbers, leading your team to 60 wins, and having the second most win shares in the entire league, while finishing 7th in the MVP standings. Truly, one of the most competitive seasons of all time. Number 2, the 1988 MVP race. This one mainly came down to 3 all-time great players, but when you look at the depth overall, it was utterly jaw-dropping. The winner of the award was a young Michael Jordan, who had what many people believe the greatest individual season of all time. On the year, he averaged 35 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6 assists, 3.2 steals, and 1.6 blocks, while hitting 53% of his shots and while winning the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year. He was a terrifying monster on both the offensive end and the defensive end, while leading a Chicago Bulls team to 50 wins, who had no business winning that many games. Second place was Larry Bird, who averaged 30 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.6 steals, while having 50, 40, 90 percentages. Bird was the epitome of efficient this season. And in third place was Magic Johnson, who was still leading the all-time great Showtime Lakers, as he averaged roughly 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 12 assists, while hitting 49% of his shots. I could keep going about the rest of the list, but just look at the strength of the competition between spots 4 through 8. Look at the numbers that these guys put up. Almost any other season, any one of these guys could be winning the MVP award, but they just happened to be going against Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson when they were at their individual best. For goodness sake, let's scroll down all the way to the 12th spot, where you'll find the all-time great Isaiah Thomas, who led his Detroit Pistons to 54 wins, who eventually went all the way to the NBA Finals. This is quite possibly the deepest MVP race of all time. Here is my list of honorable mentions, should any of these seasons have made the top 10 list instead. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. Number 1. The 1962 MVP race. This one is not only famous, but it was incredibly historic, as it includes many NBA records. The winner of the MVP award this season was Bill Russell, who was absolutely revered within the league at this time, as he was not only an NBA champion, but he was seen as the ultimate winner and as the ultimate team player. On the year, he averaged 19 points, 23.6 rebounds, and 4.5 assists, while leading his Celtics to a 60-20 record, while being widely recognized as the best defensive player in the entire league. Second place was Wilt Chamberlain, who averaged a mere 50.4 points per game, 25.7 rebounds, and 2.4 assists, while hitting 50.6% of his shots. Without question, this was certainly the most monstrous and jaw-dropping statistical season of all time, but due to Bill Russell's winning impact, they gave him the award. Then in third place, you had Oscar Robertson, who had the first triple-double average over the course of a season in NBA history, as he averaged roughly 31 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 11.5 assists, while leading his team to a 43-37 record. In fourth place was Elgin Baylor, who averaged a stupid 38 points, 18.6 rebounds, and 4.6 assists. With that being said, Baylor did miss a significant amount of time that season due to his service in the military. Then in fifth place was Jerry West, who averaged about 31 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists. And in sixth place was Bob Pettit, averaging 31 points, 19 rebounds, 4 assists, while making 45% of his shots. Any single one of these players could have won the MVP award that season, and it would have made sense based on the gaudy numbers they put up. But ultimately, they gave it to the guy who was the greatest example of a winner, and that theme has remained intact throughout the vast history of the MVP award. Despite what you hear from kids on modern day social media, there has actually been many athletic freaks in the NBA's history. Some of the greatest dunkers the league has ever seen did in fact play before either of us were born. Today, I'm bringing to light some players that I will not let you guys forget. First off, Stromile Swift. This 6'9" power forward entered the NBA in the year 2000. And although he was no superstar or even an all-star for that matter, he was certainly a highlight getter and a remarkably ferocious dunker, as he has some incredible highlight compilations that almost never get any shine. One of the reasons he's not really remembered, other than by the biggest basketball nerds, is because this dude spent his entire career playing on bad teams. But like I said before, this guy was ferocious, and he had the kind of attitude and personality where he was going to let you know about it. The second player is Desmond Mason. If we were to hold a massive slam dunk contest tournament where the greatest dunkers in NBA history all competed against one another, Desmond Mason would be my dark horse candidate. This dude was insanely athletic. As a 6'7" small forward, he can make just about any kind of dunk, including windmills, East Bays, from the free throw line, whatever. But beyond that, he was actually a pretty solid basketball player. Earlier in his career, he was a 6th Man of the Year candidate, and later on, when he was starting for Milwaukee, he was averaging about 17 points per game. He was a remarkable above-the-rim player, whether it was in the dunk contest or in the actual games, and he was actually the NBA's dunk contest winner in 2001. Next is Jason Richardson. This 6'6" wing actually competed in the same era as Desmond Mason, as the two went toe-to-toe in the slam dunk contest and one of the most underrated dunk contest battles in NBA history. He won the slam dunk contest in back-to-back seasons in 2002 and 2003. Before Zach LaVine was flying through the air doing a variety of dunks with insane ease, that's what Jason Richardson was doing, as he made windmills, East Bay dunks, and variations of East Bays look insanely easy. If he was a superstar player, then these dunk contest victories would be remembered even more fondly, and you'd be seeing these dunks over and over again for the rest of time. But instead, seeing that he was just a solid role player, they're now a bit underrated and overshadowed by comparison. Next is the 6'10 power forward Larry Nance. When everybody likes to talk about how players are now bigger, stronger, and faster than they were in years past, Larry Nance Sr. is a great player to bring up. Because as impressive as his son is as a dunker, there is no question that Sr. is bigger and more impressive. This guy was the NBA's first ever dunk contest winner, which took place in 1984. And personally, my favorite dunk of his was this one, which they actually only scored a 44. But to be quite frank, I don't think I ever saw this dunk again in the NBA's dunk contest, so this should have been at least a 49. He was also a solid player overall, as he averaged as high as 22 points per game with the Phoenix Suns in 1987, and with his size, length, and his ability to cover ground, he was also a very solid defensive player. The last player we're looking at in this video is the 6'4 shooting guard Darrell Griffith. This guy was a high flyer and a quality player. He was the NBA's Rookie of the Year in 1981, and this guy was so magnificent above the rim that he earned one of the greatest nicknames in NBA history, which is Dr. Duncanstein. Imagine having a nickname like Dr. Duncanstein as a 6'4 player. Unfortunately, he's not really remembered because he spent the prime years of his career with the Utah Jazz before they acquired Karl Malone and John Stockton. With that being said, Utah fans will fondly remember this guy as one of the most jaw-dropping athletes of all time. But like I said before, he was quite the quality scorer overall, as he got as high as 22 points per game in 1983. And he would be quite dangerous in the modern NBA, as he was actually the most efficient three-point shooter in the entire league in 1984. So that was just a quick little reminder that there have always been remarkably skilled athletic freaks throughout the NBA. And please, let me know in the comment section below who is a player that you'd like to bring attention to. I look forward to hearing your suggestions in the comment section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.